100 mind traps that philosophers still can't escape to fall asleep to. What if your thoughts are not your own? What if the voice you think is you, the planner, the doubter, the dreamer, has been quietly looping through the same traps for centuries? Not because you're unaware, but because the mind loves its own cage. Tonight, we wander through 100 of philosophy's most persistent illusions, the puzzles that even the wisest thinkers could never untangle, not to solve them, but to feel them, to let them pass through you like wind through an open window. You'll hear echoes of Descartes, Nietzsche, Buddha, even Schrödinger's cat might curl up beside your mind. But don't brace yourself for answers. This isn't a battle of logic. It's a gentle unraveling, a slow-motion freefall through questions that cradle more than they cut. So breathe in, lie back, and let your mind drift into the beautiful confusion that lives just beneath thought. The mirror that thinks. Have you ever looked in the mirror, not to fix your hair or check your expression, but simply to wonder who or what is looking back? In this quiet hour, as your thoughts begin to loosen their grip, we start with a question that's as old as wonder itself. How can the mind study itself? It sounds simple, until you sit with it. You are thinking about your thoughts, which means a part of you is watching another part of you think. But then, who is doing the watching? A mirror cannot reflect itself. A hand cannot grasp itself. And yet, here we are, trying to know the very thing doing the knowing. Somewhere, two strangers sit at a dim train station, long past midnight. One turns to the other and says, "Do you ever get the feeling that your thoughts are looking at you, not the other way around?" The other smiles, not surprised, not alarmed, just quietly awake. "Every time I try to be honest with myself," they reply, "I wonder if I'm just hearing an echo." This is the paradox of self-reference. Your brain, just tissue, cells, and electrical pulses, somehow generates a sense of I, not just a body moving through space, but a self who wonders, who hesitates, who feels. And here's where the floor starts to tilt. You don't just feel, you feel yourself feeling. You don't just think, you notice your thoughts. You don't just exist, you experience existence. But if the thinker is part of the thought, where do you stand when you try to get outside it? Where is the edge of this mind you're living inside? It's like being in a dream that's aware it's dreaming. The moment you try to touch certainty, it softens beneath your fingers, like fog that seemed solid from afar. And still, somehow, we go on. You make choices. You pause when something feels off. You trust your intuition, while knowing that intuition itself is a pattern shaped by memory, emotion, and things you can't even name. Is it an illusion? Maybe. But if it is, it's an illusion that feeds your dog in the morning, that hugs a friend just a second longer when they're hurting, that wonders if the sky always looked this blue, or if you're just paying more attention now. You begin to see the illusion of stability might be the most stable thing we have. So, as your breath begins to slow and your thoughts grow soft around the edges, let this sink in, not as a problem to solve, but as a kind of hush that lives at the core of thinking itself. The mind you are using to understand the world is made of the same dust and dreams as the world you're trying to understand. And the thinker you believe you are is part of the thought. Rest here for a moment. Let the mirror go still. You're not breaking it. You're becoming it. Next, we'll enter a stranger hall of mirrors, a question that watches you back. The question follows you. What if the question you are asking is looking back at you? It may sound strange, even impossible, but sit with it for a moment. Not as an idea to be analyzed, but as a presence to be felt. Every question you have ever whispered in the dark, every desperate why, every wondering what will happen, every quiet why, cannot float away into empty space. It can be alive, swirling around you, waiting, watching. There is a story from the Zen tradition. A student asks the master, "What is the real self?" And the master replies, "Who is asking?" That is not a distraction. That is not intelligence. That is an invitation to fall back into the unknown. In Zen, this kind of riddle is called a koan, not to be solved as a riddle, but to be dissolved into, like fog dissolving into the morning light. A famous koan asks, "What was your original face before your parents were born?" It doesn't want an answer. It wants to destroy the part of you that always needs a question. Questions like these aren't passive. They work on you. When you ask, "What is the meaning of life?" the question realigns your focus. It stretches your sense of time, of responsibility, of what matters. You're not just searching for something. You're being recreated through the searching. In philosophy, we often think of questions as tools, things we use to carve out the world, to extract truth. But what if it were the other way around? What if the question weren't a tool, but a mirror? What if they are entities in themselves, shaping the shape of our minds? "I don't know who I am," someone might say. But in the act of asking the question, they've shifted something. The question opens up a space, and that space begins to echo. Maybe that's why some questions feel so heavy, as if they've always been there, buried under the noise. You don't answer them. You live them. Two friends sit under a dim streetlight, together in silence after a long day. Finally, one whispers, "Do you ever wonder if we're asking the wrong questions?" The other is silent for a moment, just watching the shadows fall on the sidewalk. Then, quietly, "Maybe. Or maybe the right people are asking us, and we just don't realize it." What happens when you stop trying to solve the mystery and start feeling it solve you? Breathe. Right here, between the words and the wonder, there is something deeper than understanding. The silence between the questions. It holds more truth than the loudest answers ever could. Let's go there now. Deeper, beneath the language, to the place where your thinking stops and something else listens. The paradox of definition. A word is a net we throw across the sea of meaning, but sometimes, when we pull it back, we find it empty, because the thing we tried to catch was never meant to be held. Have you ever tried to explain what love is mid-heartbreak, or describe the feeling of déjà vu while still inside it? It slips, doesn't it? Even the sharpest language dulls around the edges of lived experience. One evening, someone at the train station said, "I think what I'm feeling is nostalgic, but not for the past, for a version of me that almost was." Their voice cracked right at almost. That pause says more than any textbook definition ever could. To define something is to set its boundaries. To say, it is this and not that. But what if the thing we're trying to define is still unfolding, still becoming? When we say, "This is who I am," aren't we also freezing ourselves at a single frame in the film of a moving life? There's comfort in clarity, but sometimes clarity costs us the living mess, the realness. In ancient texts, this was more than poetry. The Tao Te Ching opens not with certainty, but a warning. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, meaning, as soon as you name it, you've already lost it. Like trying to hold fog in your hands. Even in logic and mathematics, this trap is alive. Kurt Gödel, whose mind unraveled infinities, proved that no system, no matter how perfect, can explain itself from within. His incompleteness theorem is not just for numbers. It whispers, there will always be truths that live just outside our reach, like a mirror reflecting another mirror, never showing the thing behind the glass. There's a scene I remember. A man in his 60s stood in a museum, staring at a single ink stroke on rice paper. A child tugged at his sleeve and asked, "What is it?" He smiled and said, "It's a question pretending to be an answer." Then they both stared, silent, a little longer. You've likely felt this paradox in quiet ways, when you try to explain grief and the listener nods before you're done. When someone asks what you believe in and you start with, "well," then trail off. The words arrive dressed for certainty, but the heart remains barefoot. And maybe that's the point. Definitions are useful, like maps, but living is more like walking a forest trail at dusk. You never step in the same light twice. The terrain shifts, even if the name stays the same. A gentle reminder now, if your thoughts drift, let them. Definitions may pin down meaning, but sleep doesn't work that way. Let the words loosen their grip. Let their shapes blur, like lanterns in mist. A soft voice might say, "Do you think we'll ever really know what anything means?" And another might reply, "Maybe knowing was never the goal. Maybe it's enough to be in the presence of something real." So we speak, and yet silence keeps humming beneath it all. Ready now? Let's slip further inward, into the loop where even time can't decide what it is. The Grandfather Paradox. The Grandfather Paradox is more than a time travel riddle whispered by sci-fi novels or midnight debates. It's a wound in the logic of reality. Suppose you travel back in time and prevent your grandfather from ever meeting your grandmother. That single act, done by you, undoes the possibility of you existing in the first place. But if you never existed, you couldn't have gone back to interfere. And yet, here you are, standing in the past, unraveling the very thread that led you there. The loop tangles into itself. At first glance, it's playful, a logical toy, a mind game. But stay with it long enough, and the joke fades into something quieter and far stranger. You start to see the question it's really asking. Is time something that moves forward like a line, or folds inward like origami? Does cause always come before effect? Or are they dancing, reversing, collapsing, self-correcting in ways we can't yet understand? Some physicists suggest that paradoxes like this don't destroy causality. They just reveal that our idea of it is too simple. In certain interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the Novikov self-consistency principle, time can loop, but only in ways that resolve into coherence. No matter how much you try to alter the past, the timeline corrects itself. You might attempt to stop the union of your grandparents, but your very attempt becomes part of the event that leads to it. The effect becomes the cause. The loop closes. Isn't that just fate? Someone might ask quietly in the dark, eyes closed, drifting toward sleep. Or maybe it's something deeper than fate. Another voice answers. Maybe it's a kind of order beneath our idea of control. And in that silence, something unspoken is understood. That the arrow of time might not be an arrow at all. That we, who live by calendars and clocks, might be walking through a fog, where events emerge not in strict order, but as ripples echoing from a deeper geometry. You've fallen into this trap before. Every time you regret a decision, every time you wonder what if, time loops in the mind, just as it might loop in the universe. Memory reaches backward. Desire tries to rewrite. And yet, Here you are, still here, carried along by something that refuses to be simple. So let the seconds lose their grip. Let the idea of before and after soften. We're drifting now into a space where logic folds and the line becomes a spiral, where you are the question and your own answer, again and again. The illusion of choice. You stand in the coffee aisle, staring at 12 brands, dark roast, fair trade, organic, bold. You think, I'm free to choose, but your hand moves before you decide. The same one you always get, the one your father drank, the one you saw in that ad 3 weeks ago while half awake. There's something strange about decisions. They arrive like whispers, not declarations. You feel like you choose, but neuroscience suggests otherwise. Before you're even aware of the thought, I'll pick this one, your brain has already begun to prepare the action. A soft, silent preparation in the neural backstage, seconds before the actor takes the stage. One voice says, "But I could have chosen differently." Another replies, "Maybe." But could you have chosen to be the kind of person who would choose differently? Two people sit in a quiet laundromat. One folds their clothes without looking up. "Do you ever wonder," the other asks, "if we're actually deciding anything, or just watching the movie of our own minds?" A pause. "Honestly," they say, "sometimes it feels like I'm the last to know what I'll do next." This isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to invite you to breathe. Because if the self is not the master, but the narrator, then maybe your real freedom lies not in control, but in rhythm. Like a surfer does not control the wave, only how they meet it. Like breath does not control the wind, only how it flows through the chest. Perhaps what we call choice isn't about rewriting fate. Perhaps it's about how beautifully we tell the story as it unfolds. To notice when it hurts, to move when it's time, to forgive the delay. A man once stood at a traffic light and said softly to a stranger beside him, "I was going to turn left, but I think I needed to go straight." Funny how I knew only when I stepped forward. What if that is the nature of freedom? A dance, not of escape, but of attunement. Not breaking the pattern, but knowing where you are in its flow. So when you feel caught between yes and no, remember, the self is not a commander, it's a lighthouse, and choice is just where its light happens to fall. Let's rest in that space now, that gentle space between motion and meaning, between intention and instinct, between you and the story being told. Next, we ask, is your life the original or just a simulation? Let's drift onward. The Simulation Seduction. There's a strange comfort in this idea that none of this is real, that the cracks in the sidewalk, the scent of morning coffee, your memories of laughter or grief are just data points in a program too vast to comprehend. This is the simulation hypothesis, the suggestion that we may be living inside a construct, a world rendered by a higher intelligence with unimaginable processing power. Philosopher Nick Bostrom famously posed that if advanced civilizations can run ancestor simulations, detailed recreations of minds with conscious experience, then it is statistically likely that we ourselves are one of those simulations rather than the original, physical beings. That idea settles in slowly, like fog through a window left open at night. You blink. The walls don't dissolve. Your hands still move. But something in your perception begins to loosen. If we are code, then where does the pain come from? Why do the tears sting when they fall? Why does heartbreak ache in the chest and not just flash across a server log? One evening, sitting by the kitchen table, someone asked softly, "If this is a simulation, why does it feel so personal?" Their partner, sipping tea, replied without looking up. Maybe that's the point. The code doesn't care if it's real. It just cares that you believe it. We're wired to seek meaning. Even if we're pixels dancing in a dream, we still long for purpose. That's the paradox at the heart of the simulation seduction. Because if none of it is real, then everything becomes precious. A child's laugh, the way the sun filters through dust in the late afternoon, the stories we tell ourselves before sleep. Suddenly, they are the only anchors in a world without ground. And even if we could prove it, if the walls flickered and the sky tore open to reveal a developer's interface, what would we do with that knowledge? Stop loving? Stop hoping? Or would we hold each other tighter, knowing this fragile illusion is all we have? What you feel is not less true because it might be programmed. Your sorrow still weighs something. Your dreams still glow. Meaning in a simulated world might not be found in logic, but in the depth of your experience. So now, let the thought go. Let the pixels blur around the edges. Let sleep come like the soft hum of a server, cooling somewhere far beyond stars. Next, we'll drift into another trap, one that smells like truth, but fades like smoke each time you try to hold it. The liar's loop. There's a sentence that folds in on itself like a snake biting its own tail. This statement is false. And just like that, the mind stutters. If it's true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. A loop, no exit, just a quiet hum of contradiction that never settles. Wait, one voice says, soft and puzzled. But what if it just doesn't mean anything? The other replies, smiling slightly. And yet, here we are, still talking about it. This is not just a joke for late-night philosophy classes. This is the liar's paradox, and it's been quietly haunting minds since ancient Greece, a sentence that refers to itself and breaks the system it was born in. Language, it turns out, is more fragile than it looks. You see, most of the time, we treat language like a mirror. You say what is, and the sentence reflects it. But this sentence turns the mirror inward. It reflects itself, and when mirrors face mirrors, the reflection collapses into a tunnel with no end. Gently now, think of the implications. This tiny knot of words became the seed of an entire forest of thought. Mathematician Kurt Gödel used a variation of this self-reference to prove that even in perfect logic systems, like the ones behind math and machines, there are truths that cannot be proven, not because we're too dumb to find them, but because the system itself can't contain them. It's like trying to lift yourself by your own shoelaces, someone whispers, adjusting their blanket. The other voice responds, or like looking for the edge of a circle. You may never stumble on this paradox in your daily errands, but you've felt its echo. Every time you've questioned yourself, doubting something you believed just moments before. Every time a reason cancels itself mid-thought, and you're left blinking at nothing in particular. You might think it's just a clever trick, but loops like this shape the foundation of how we understand meaning, logic, and even artificial intelligence. If a machine reads, "This program will not halt," should it keep going? Or freeze forever in doubt? And maybe that's the secret. Not all knots are meant to be untied. Some are meant to be held. Let your breath settle into that soft, slow rhythm. Not everything has to make sense to feel real. And there's peace, unexpected peace, in knowing that truth might not always sit still, that sometimes it dances at the edge of what can be said. Next, we'll wander into another paradox, one that doesn't speak, but asks, if you are not who you were, then who is watching you change? But for now, Let your thoughts rest where logic ends. Sleep if you drift. Loop if you must. The Ship of Theseus. There's an old question, quiet as moonlight on still water. If you take apart a ship, one piece at a time, and replace each with something new, is it still the same ship? And if you gather all the old parts and reassemble them into another, then which one is truly it? The Ship of Theseus isn't about ships, it's about you. Your body changes. Cells die and regenerate. Skin renews. Bones shift. Blood flows differently in youth than it does in age. But the illusion of continuity persists. You look in the mirror and say, "That's me." But what are you seeing? A container? A memory of yourself? Or just the latest version of a pattern that's always in motion? Do you ever feel like you're a different person than you were 10 years ago? Honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm a different person every morning. It's a quiet truth we try not to face too directly, how identity slips through our fingers like sand, yet we still cup our hands around it, trying to catch self. Some philosophers say identity is a story, one we write line by line. Others call it a flame, passed from one candle to another, never quite the same, but still burning. Neuroscience suggests our memories, even the most cherished ones, are edited every time we recall them. So what is stable? What remains when nothing else does? A child's laughter echoes into an adult's worry. A teenager's rebellion becomes a parent's rulebook. The shape of your face, the beat of your thoughts, even the weight of your dreams, they've all shifted. So is there a core, a soul, or just the music of change? Do you think you're still the same person you were back in high school? I think I'm the ghost of her, still wearing her name. Perhaps the answer isn't in choosing between the new ship or the old wood. Maybe the self is neither, or both, a process, a motion, a memory rehearsed so often it becomes rhythm. You are not a thing. You are an unfolding. So, as you lay here, let your sense of I dissolve a little. Not vanish, just soften. Feel yourself not as something fixed, but something flowing. A whisper stretched across years, a river of breath and memory and change. The Ship of Theseus isn't just a thought experiment, it's a mirror. And tonight, it reflects not who you are, but who you're becoming. Now, close that reflection gently. We're about to step beyond the edges of logic itself, where power meets paradox, and omnipotence questions its own existence. The stone God can't lift. There's a question so old, so worn by the tongue of time, it almost hums when spoken. Can an all-powerful being create a stone so heavy that even it cannot lift it? It sounds like a riddle for children, playful, light, but sit with it long enough, and it begins to whisper something heavier, the kind of weight that doesn't fall on your shoulders but inside your mind. If the answer is yes, the being is not all-powerful, because it cannot lift the stone. If the answer is no, then it cannot create the stone. Either way, the notion of omnipotence seems to fold in on itself like a house built from mirrors, beautiful, infinite, and utterly fragile. Wait, doesn't that just mean the concept itself is flawed? One voice asks, quietly, like two friends sharing thoughts over warm tea by a rainy window. The other replies, maybe. Or maybe our logic is the flawed part. Maybe some questions just aren't meant to be solved. There's a soft pause. Or maybe we're trying to force language to carry what only silence can. This paradox doesn't just haunt theology. It echoes through every space where we believe in absolutes. Absolute control, absolute freedom, absolute certainty. And yet, even the word absolute starts to tremble under its own weight. like a bridge with no ground beneath it, floating but going nowhere. Here's the strange thing. The trap isn't in the god or the stone or even the answer. It's in the question. A question shaped like a circle with no edges, spinning gently in your head. And the more you chase it, the more you realize maybe paradoxes aren't meant to be escaped, but held lightly, like holding your breath underwater, not because you're drowning, but because you're swimming through thought. Even infinity has borders, if only drawn by thought itself. We say a being is all-powerful, but whose rules are we using? Ours? Logic is a lattice of glass, elegant, precise, but maybe too fragile to trap a god. Or maybe divinity isn't about doing everything, but being something we can't define in words. Power isn't always a force. Sometimes it's the space between actions, the stillness behind the storm. Someone once asked, not out loud but in passing, while waiting in line at a bakery, "Do you think it's possible to know everything?" The person ahead smiled, not turning around. Depends who's asking and who's listening. You see, even the simplest answers require someone to hear them, and in that act, in listening, some truths become real, even if they can't be explained. So as you rest now, let this thought cradle you gently. Not every contradiction is a flaw. Some are invitations to let go of the need to know, to solve, to hold everything still. Tonight, don't seek resolution. Seek rhythm. Seek rest. Let paradox be your pillow, and let the question sleep beside you. Because next, we'll drift into something even more curious. A world where matter and mind stop pretending to be strangers, and may in fact be one and the same. The hard problem of consciousness. You close your eyes and see nothing. Yet somehow, you know that nothing. Not as a void, but as an experience. What is it that turns electrochemical activity into a sunset, a song, a sorrow you can't name? You're not just observing the world, you are feeling it. And no scan, no MRI, no equation has yet touched the edge of that quiet miracle. This is what philosopher David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness. It's not about how the brain controls movement, memory, or attention. We know a great deal about those. The mystery is deeper. How physical processes inside your skull create the taste of strawberries, the warmth of love, the sting of regret. Why does it feel like something to be you? The brain, in all its folded glory, is a marvel of evolution. Neurons fire, networks synchronize, chemicals flood and recede. Science can measure these with astonishing precision. But there's a canyon between the facts we can map and the feelings we cannot explain. We can describe what happens in the brain, but not why it lights up with experience instead of staying silent like a machine. Late one evening, two friends sit on a park bench under the fading sky. "Have you ever wondered," one asks, "why it hurts when someone leaves? Like physically hurts?" The other shrugs. "Maybe it's just hormones or something." But it's not just the chemicals, is it? It's me. The way I feel it. That ache behind the ribs. That sense of loss that has no weight, but still presses down. A long pause. "Yeah," the second one says softly. "And you can't ever show someone else what that feels like. Not really." That gap, the unshareable essence of experience, is what makes consciousness so hauntingly elusive. Some neuroscientists think we'll solve it with enough data, as if awareness is just an algorithm waiting to be decoded. Others believe we've misunderstood the problem altogether, that consciousness might not emerge from matter, but might be woven into the very fabric of reality, like time or space. What if your brain doesn't generate consciousness, but instead receives it, like a radio tuned to a station? Then every thought, every dream, every flicker of wonder isn't manufactured, it's translated. That would mean consciousness isn't the end product of neurons, but their starting point. Not an effect, but a ground. Still, the question remains unanswered, and perhaps it always will. Some truths may be felt, but never explained, like music with no notes, like love with no origin. Now, rest your thoughts. Let them drift like clouds over the vast sky of awareness. Beneath the questions, there's a stillness, a knowing that doesn't need answers. In the next segment, we'll gently turn inward and ask, is the world around you real, or are you dreaming it into form? The Solipsism Trap. She paused at the elevator, watching the doors close just before she could reach them. A man beside her smiled and said, "Maybe that one wasn't meant for us." The moment felt oddly personal, as if the world had choreographed it just for her. But then again, was there anyone else there at all? Solipsism is not a theory. It's a quiet suspicion. It's that strange ache you feel when you look at someone's eyes and wonder, are you truly in there, or are you just a shape in my dream? The thought doesn't always announce itself with logic. Sometimes it shows up in everyday reflections, like when you walk past a mirror and feel less certain that the face you see is part of something shared. You might ask, how do I know other people are real? But there's a deeper version of that question. What does real even mean if all I've ever known comes through the theater of my own awareness? The taste of your morning coffee, the comfort of a familiar voice, the pang of loneliness when no one replies. These sensations feel private, sealed behind your skull. No one can open them, not even those who say they understand. One night, a woman leaned over to her friend during a quiet train ride and asked, "Do you think other people are actually thinking when they're quiet? Or are they just waiting to resume the script?" Her friend laughed, but didn't answer. The silence felt heavier than it should have. Solipsism isn't a belief people walk around preaching. It creeps in between sentences. In moments when empathy fails, when someone shrugs off your feelings and you realize they can't possibly feel what you feel. Not truly, and maybe they never have. But solipsism isn't just loneliness dressed as philosophy. It's also a kind of surrender. Because if everything is unknowable, then control slips away. You can't manage how others feel, or whether they even feel in the same way. All you can do is meet each moment with curiosity, with a tender honesty, like placing a candle on a windowsill, even when no one may ever see it. And if this world is yours alone, then kindness is not for others. It's a way of beautifying your own mind. That makes even a small act sacred, like holding the door or smiling to no one in particular. There's a quiet power in this view, not because it's true, but because it humbles you. And maybe that humility is the real point. Not to prove others exist, but to meet the mystery as if they might, just in case they do. So rest easy now. Let the shapes of others blur. Let the question stay unanswered. You don't need to solve the world to feel it. In the next breath, we'll enter another puzzle, where forgotten things shape who you are. A place where memories aren't just lost, but reimagined. The Memory Mirage. They say memory is the thread that holds us together, that without it, we unravel. But what if that thread is fraying, not from time, but from truth? You see, memory wears the mask of permanence. It feels sacred, like an untouched shrine deep inside the mind. Yet when scientists examine it, the shrine turns out to be a stage, repainted, rearranged, rewritten with every recall. Each time you remember, you're not retrieving a fixed moment, you're recreating a story. And like any storyteller, your brain edits for drama, coherence, or comfort. A single word, smashed instead of bumped, can shift how fast a car seemed to crash in a witness's mind. A doctored photograph can plant a childhood that never existed. Do you remember our old dog? You mean Bruno? No, we never had a dog. Silence, a laugh, a pause that lingers. Then why do I see him so clearly? It's not deception, it's reconstruction. Our minds do not archive, they compose. We mix facts with feelings, trauma with interpretation, and nostalgia with need. And so the past becomes less a record and more a mirror, warped by who we are now. But here's where it turns tender and terrifying. Because if memory is so fluid, so fallible, then what becomes of the self? Isn't your identity stitched from your past? From your triumphs, your regrets, your laughter in kitchens long gone? If those are shifting sands, do you still stand? Or are you drifting with them? Maybe this is the deeper truth. The self isn't a statue. It's a flame, a small fire that burns in the wind of time, rebuilt each night from flickers of what we choose to remember and what we cannot help but forget. So if you've ever doubted your past, if a detail slipped, if a face faded, know this: you're not breaking, you're becoming, and the warmth that memory leaves behind, that might be more real than the facts themselves. Close your eyes now. Let the memories blur like rain-soaked watercolors. Let go of the need to know exactly how it was. What matters is not precision, but presence. And in this soft forgetting, we make space for the next riddle, one that logic itself will struggle to hold. Russell's set. Some puzzles don't demand answers. They only ask for your company. Like an old clock ticking in an empty room, steady, unresolved, somehow comforting. Bertrand Russell offered one of those puzzles. It was simple enough to state, yet deep enough to split the very floorboards of mathematics. Picture this: a librarian keeps a list of every book in the library that does not mention itself. One quiet evening, they turn the list over in their hands and ask, should the catalog list itself? If it does, then it shouldn't, because it's now mentioning itself. But if it doesn't, then by definition it should. A thought loop without escape, like trying to bite your own teeth. Two friends pause at a sidewalk cafe, each stirring tea absent-mindedly as the question lingers in the air. One finally asks, have you ever felt like you're too aware of your own thinking? Like you're trying to clean a window with a wet sponge, you only smear the clarity. The other nods. Yeah. The more I try to explain myself to myself, the further I get from feeling understood. Russell's paradox wasn't just a mathematical hiccup. It shattered the comfortable world of logic where everything had its neat box. Set theory, the foundation of mathematics, was supposed to classify everything. But Russell showed that even the act of classification can collapse on itself, like a definition trying to define itself out of existence. And isn't that how self-awareness feels sometimes? Like we're looking into a mirror that's looking back. We try to include ourselves in the story we're telling, but the narrator keeps slipping behind the curtain. At a train station, a woman steps out of the restroom and finds herself facing a cleaning sign that reads, "This sign is only for restrooms not marked by signs." She chuckles, slightly confused, and lets it go. But the thought follows her down the platform. We crave certainty, that our thoughts are complete, that the systems we build, belief, logic, identity, are stable. But Russell's set whispers that some truths won't stay still long enough to be catalogued. They shimmer just at the edge of grasp, like a melody you almost remember but can't quite hum. The human mind is perhaps the greatest set of all, collecting thoughts, excluding some, including others, but never quite managing to list itself without contradiction. We are aware, and aware that we're aware, but never fully able to step outside of that loop. So maybe the solution isn't to solve the paradox. Maybe it's to sit beside it. Let it be your quiet companion in the dark. You don't need to understand every contradiction to rest. Let it be enough that some thoughts were never meant to land. They were meant to drift, like leaves on water, like dreams before sleep. And now, we follow a staircase that never ends, a paradox that doesn't just trap the mind, but leads it further in, step after step, thought after thought. The infinite regress. Why do we do what we do? You might say, because I chose to. But that's not the end. The next question slips in quietly. And why did you choose that? One step follows another, like footprints dissolving behind you in the tide. Philosophy has a name for this: infinite regress. Every explanation demands another, and each answer collapses into another question, like mirrors facing each other, repeating into a blur. Late at night, in that soft space between waking and sleep, this chain of questioning doesn't feel intellectual. It feels haunting. You reach back, hoping to grab onto something, some anchor, some first cause. But your fingers find only mist. You begin to wonder, maybe the answers were never stacked vertically, like building blocks. Maybe they ripple outward endlessly, like a pebble in still water. The further you go, the fainter the edges become. A conversation murmurs in the background of this thought. So, you meditate because it brings peace? Yeah. And why do you want peace? Because life is hard. Why is it hard? Because I expect it to be easy. And why do you expect that? I don't know. This small human exchange reveals the infinite regress in everyday life. Not in a philosophy classroom, but in your kitchen, on a slow afternoon, between two people searching for something they can't quite name. We want origins, stories with clear beginnings, a first page, a first spark, a first breath. But what if that desire is a comfort, not a truth? What if reality has no floor beneath it, no foundational reason, just movement, just unfolding? Some ancient thinkers like Aristotle believed there must be an unmoved mover, some force that began all motion without itself being moved. But others, like Nagarjuna in Buddhist philosophy, gently pulled the rug away. They suggested that clinging to causes is just another form of attachment. That wisdom lies not in finding the first domino, but in watching how they fall. If everything we do stems from something prior, then maybe we are less authors and more dancers, moving to a rhythm we did not compose, yet somehow still beautiful, still alive. And maybe, just maybe, freedom isn't about stopping the chain, but learning to float within it, not needing to know why you chose, just knowing that you did, and that this moment is already part of something endless. Close your eyes, let the staircase vanish, let the need for origin dissolve. You are not climbing anymore. You are gliding, thought by thought, breath by breath. And as we drift forward, we enter something even stranger, a question so sharp it turns back on itself, a paradox about whether logic can ever truly explain itself. The rule that breaks itself. There's something quietly unsettling about trying to hold your own feet while standing, not physically, mentally. The moment a system tries to grasp itself, define itself, alter itself, it starts to unravel like a scarf pulled from both ends. A man at a small cafe once looked up from his crossword puzzle and said, not to anyone in particular, "Funny how the instructions for the puzzle are inside the puzzle itself. So if the instructions are wrong," he didn't finish, just smiled, tore the corner of his napkin, and wrote the word loop. That's the kind of trap we're stepping into here. Meta rules, self-editing laws, a logic that eats its own tail. When a rule allows itself to be changed by its own logic, what prevents chaos? Or worse, infinite contradiction? This is more than theory. It's baked into how we speak, how we write, how we build meaning. When you say, "This sentence is false," you're watching the floor cave in under your feet, because if it's true, then it's false. And if it's false, then it must be true. Try to build a dictionary that defines every word, including definition. You'll get far, but then you'll find yourself circling back. Somewhere in the spiral, meaning starts feeding on itself, not in a violent way, but like a fire warming itself with its own reflection. Why are you doing that? Because the rules say, "I should." And who made the rules? I did, but only because the old rules said I could. In a courtroom, a lawyer once questioned a regulation that allowed the law to revise itself without external approval. The judge paused, then said, "It appears the rule is both the author and the eraser." And everyone in the room nodded, but no one felt steadier. Self-referencing systems are everywhere. Constitutions that amend themselves, algorithms that rewrite their own code, even your own beliefs, when your new understanding reshapes the lens through which you evaluate the old ones. But if every frame is made from its own reflection, how do you know what's true? Maybe you don't. Maybe truth, in this case, is not something you land on, but something you glide across, like a bird over still water, never fully touching the surface. The philosopher Kurt Gödel proved that any logical system rich enough to include arithmetic would inevitably contain statements it cannot prove. A quiet, mathematical way of saying the map cannot fully include itself. And yet, we still build these maps. We trust them, use them. Even if the paper's edge curls into paradox, it holds together just long enough to guide us. So we relax, mid-flight, no ground, no sky, just drift. Thoughts brushing by like wind chimes, soft, unpredictable, suspended in their own rules. And just as your breath begins to follow that same rhythm, we prepare to enter a deeper paradox. One that doesn't ask what is happening, but when. The riddle of time. Why do we move forward when physics whispers that we never had to? The arrow of time. You ever notice how toast always falls butter side down? It's not fate, it's entropy. But that simple image hides a riddle that has haunted minds from Einstein to Buddhist monks. Why does time move in one direction? "Why is it," she asked softly, cradling her tea, "that I remember yesterday but not tomorrow?" He smiled faintly, watching the steam curl between them. "Maybe tomorrow hasn't happened yet." "Or maybe," she whispered, "it has, but we're just not tuned in." Time in the equations of physics isn't picky. The laws of nature don't mind if you run them forward or backward. A planet orbits a star the same way in reverse. Molecules bounce and collide in both directions. At the quantum level, the film could rewind and you might never notice. And yet, here we are. Spilled milk doesn't leap back into the glass. Ashes don't reassemble into paper. We age, we remember, we move forward. This direction, this relentless march, is called the arrow of time. And it doesn't come from the laws of motion, but from something much more subtle: entropy. Entropy is a kind of cosmic forgetting. It measures disorder, randomness. A sandcastle has low entropy. It's ordered, but the wind loves high entropy. And so, grain by grain, the castle fades. That's the game the universe plays. It doesn't forbid order. It just prefers mess. Like a deck of cards that, once shuffled, rarely falls back into perfect sequence. But here's the twist. Entropy isn't a commandment etched in cosmic stone. It's a probability, a trend. Things tend to fall apart, but nothing says they must. So why then do we live inside this trend so religiously? Why do we feel time's arrow so deeply in our bones? Some physicists suggest it's not the universe that's one way, it's us. Our memories only form in one direction. Our minds track cause and effect like a path through the woods, but never see the footprints behind us vanish. The arrow of time might not be carved into space-time itself, but traced into the grooves of our neurons, our culture, our breath. He looked up. So, could there be someone, somewhere, who lives backward? She blinked. Would they mourn before they love? Age into innocence? He shrugged. Maybe they wouldn't feel time at all. And so, we sit with the stillness of now. The arrow flies not because it must, but because it once left a bowstring we call the past. Let's loosen our grip on that bow. Rest in the moment before flight. No forward, no behind, just the quiet hum of being. And next, we step into a stranger forest, one where effects sometimes bloom before their causes. The Retrocausality Paradox. There's a strange quiet that falls just before sleep, a soft distortion where past and future start to blur. And in that hush, a question slips through. What if something you do tomorrow changes what happened today? Not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically. In the odd corners of quantum physics, there's a whisper of this very possibility. Some experiments, like the delayed choice quantum eraser, suggest that decisions made in the present might ripple backward in time, rearranging the path particles took before we even looked. It's not science fiction. It's peer-reviewed, repeated, and still makes physicists stare at the floor a little too long. Wait, how can a future choice change the past? Someone asks as they stack plates after dinner. Their friend shrugs, flicking a towel over one shoulder. Maybe time doesn't move forward. Maybe it just folds, and we're the ones walking in a line across a map that never really had direction. There's a strange comfort in that, because if time isn't what we thought, if before and after are just patterns our brain stitches together, then maybe the pressure to get everything right now, is an illusion. Maybe the version of you brushing your teeth tonight has already healed something from your childhood. Maybe the words you'll speak tomorrow are echoing back, settling gently in someone's heart today, without either of you realizing it. A child once asked, "If I forget to water the plant yesterday, can I still say sorry tomorrow and make it bloom?" No adult could answer with certainty, but none of them said no, because deep down, we all feel that pulse, that some things don't care about the rules we made for time. Grief lingers backward. Joy lights up old memories. A song you haven't heard yet makes sense of a decision you made years ago. So maybe retrocausality isn't a bug. Maybe it's the invisible stitching that holds meaning together. Let yourself rest in that soft unknowing. The mind doesn't have to solve this one. It only has to feel the edges soften. A light cough in the hallway. Someone whispers, "Didn't we already talk about this?" You nod, though it's the first time. And as your breath slows, that feeling of déjà vu slips in, not as a glitch, but as a gentle guide, because the next question is even stranger. What if two completely different things are secretly the same? The identity of indiscernibles. Somewhere between stillness and sleep, a quiet thought stirs. What makes you, you? Is it the sum of your memories, the curve of your fingerprints, or something more invisible, something that can't be pointed to but only felt? Leibniz once proposed a law that felt so obvious it hardly seemed worth debating. If two things share every property, every quality, every interaction, then they are not two things. They are the same thing, seen from two angles. There is no true two-ness without some difference. And yet, when we look closer, much closer, quantum physics whispers a contradiction. In the realm of particles, electrons can be indistinguishable in every measurable way. Identical mass, identical charge, identical behavior. And yet, we count them. We call them separate. We build our understanding of reality atop their imagined individuality. A gentle voice murmurs beside you in the dim quiet of thought. Wait, so if two things are exactly the same, they're actually just one? The other responds softly, that's what Leibniz thought. But the universe doesn't always play by rules that make sense. In that still moment, something deeper unfolds. If at the tiniest level, the universe allows duplicates without difference, what does that say about us? Could two people, living identical lives in distant galaxies, truly be distinct? Or are they echoes of a single essence, humming the same song in different corners of the cosmos? It raises another unsettling warmth. How different are you from the person you were 10 years ago? And if all your thoughts, habits, and cells have shifted, are you still the same? Or are you merely the continuation of a pattern, flickering forward? The more we seek boundaries between things, the more they blur. Individuality begins to melt like mist at sunrise. We become not separate islands, but waves rising and falling from one shared sea. Perhaps you and the stranger on the train, the child laughing down the hallway, and the quiet figure in your dreams are not separate selves, but momentary folds in the same cosmic fabric. Again, a voice returns, curious and calm. So what's left of me if I'm not just me? And the reply, like a smile in the dark, maybe what's left is everything and nothing, all at once. Let that idea cradle you now, not as confusion, but as release. You don't have to hold so tightly to the boundaries. You don't need to prove your uniqueness. In the deepest places of being, difference dissolves. You are part of the whole, and the whole is in you. And now, we drift further still, toward a paradox where reality itself only exists when watched, where even existence waits for someone to open their eyes. The quantum observer effect. A traffic light turns green just as you arrive. The bus driver nods without knowing you. Somewhere nearby, a stranger holds the door half a second longer than expected, as if they felt you approaching. And for a moment, it feels like the world is meeting you halfway. Quantum physics has a name for this strange intimacy between watcher and watched. It's called the observer effect. In experiments like the double-slit test, tiny particles, photons, electrons, don't act like things. They act like clouds of potential, possibilities. But the moment you look, they decide. The wave collapses into a point. It's as if the universe whispers, "Now that you're watching, I'll be something." So, someone asks over herbal tea, their voice tired but curious. Are you saying nothing is real until I look at it? You smile, not to dismiss, but to soften. Not unreal, you reply, just unfinished. like a song waiting for the first note. And suddenly, a memory floats in, the way a cat seems to freeze when it knows it's being watched, the way you fix your hair when you catch your reflection unexpectedly. We change, just from being seen. But what about when we're alone? Is the moon still there, drifting over the horizon, if no one is awake to witness it? Or does the moon, too, wait for an audience, like a performer backstage, unseen, undefined? The deeper truth isn't whether we alter photons in a lab. It's that the act of noticing makes things real to us. A child notices a dandelion and it becomes treasure. A partner sees your sadness and it becomes a shared silence. A stranger asks, "Are you okay?" And suddenly, maybe you are. So what is reality without an observer? Is there still a world if no one remembers the taste of coffee, the sting of winter air, the comfort of a favorite chair? These questions aren't puzzles to solve. They are invitations, gentle hands that reach out not for answers but for presence. Because maybe the universe doesn't exist despite you, but because you do. And maybe the warmth of being watched by a friend, a dog, a star, isn't surveillance. It's participation. The world rising to meet your gaze. So close your eyes. Let the floor beneath you become soft. Let the walls fade, the clock dissolve, the ceiling stretch into unformed possibility. In this quiet space between blinks, reality rests in your attention. Our next step is stranger still, not about the world outside, but the one looking out. The you behind the eyes, the mirror that never reflects itself. The self that watches itself. You sit still, not moving, not trying, just noticing. And in that noticing, something strange begins to stir. You're aware of your thoughts, but then you realize you're also aware that you're aware. A soft echo in the mind that keeps folding back in on itself. Who is watching whom? Where is the edge between subject and object when the observer becomes its own mirror? It's like I can feel my mind watching itself, one voice says in the quiet room, the way someone might confess they've seen a ghost. The other responds gently, and when you notice that, who's doing the noticing? It's a paradox older than language, and yet it feels deeply personal. In that spiral of reflection, awareness watching awareness, you begin to peel away layers of what you think you are. At first, it seems like clarity, but then comes the confusion, then stillness, then nothing. It's like peeling an onion, layer by layer, thought by thought, memory by memory. And when you get to the center, there's no solid you to be found, just space, just presence. Some say this is the heart of consciousness, not a thing that has awareness, but awareness itself. A field, not a figure. A wind, not a wing. From Zen to Advaita Vedanta, from the desert mystics to modern contemplatives, this recursive loop is both the beginning and the end of seeking. There's nothing to grab, no core to uncover. Only the falling away of the illusion that there ever was someone to search. Sometimes, the voice returns, when I try to find the real me, I feel like I disappear. Maybe that's not disappearing, comes the reply. Maybe that's freedom. What if you're not the thoughts, but the silence between them? Not the one who hears, but the hearing itself? As you listen now, to the sound of your own breath, to the warmth behind your eyes, to the stillness resting just beneath each word. You're not chasing understanding. You're dwelling in something deeper. The mind loves to wrap itself in puzzles, but this one slips through logic's hands. You cannot solve it. You can only sit with it. And in that sitting, something begins to loosen. Let your breath guide you now, like a quiet tide smoothing the edges of who you thought you were. No need to define, no need to conclude. Let your identity soften, like mist dissolving in dawn light. In the space that remains, we arrive not at an answer, but at a doorway. And beyond it waits a paradox where logic collapses, and yet somehow it all begins to make sense. The Infinite Hotel. There's a hotel, grand, quiet, and glowing, with endless hallways. Every room is occupied, every bed already taken. And yet, a new guest arrives. You'd think there's no space, but the clerk, calm as a breeze, says, "Welcome, we'll make room." With one simple shift, moving each guest from room 1 to room 2, from 2 to 3, and so on, room 1 becomes free. That's the paradox of Hilbert's Hotel, a place where even full isn't truly full, where infinity bends logic until it almost hums. Infinity is wild, someone might say during a midnight conversation in a diner booth, stirring their coffee slower than usual. You think you understand numbers, and then this shows up. The other leans back, smiling. Yeah, like packing more thoughts into a head that already feels crowded. This isn't just a quirky math trick. It's a soft unraveling of our expectations. With ordinary numbers, the world behaves, but infinity has no manners. You can subtract infinity from infinity and get, well, whatever you want, really. 0, infinity, even a fixed number. It depends on how you do it. That's not just weird, it's a deep warning. Our intuitions weren't built for the endless, and yet infinity shows up where it matters most, in cosmology, where space might stretch forever, in time, which keeps moving, never asking if you're ready. In your thoughts, when you spiral through questions that breed more questions, like reflections caught between two mirrors. No edge, no anchor, just endless wondering. Sometimes, when people talk about the universe, on a walk home from work or in a waiting room, they say things like, "I just can't wrap my head around it." That's okay. Some things aren't meant to be wrapped. They're meant to be carried like a small flame, too bright to touch, but just enough to see the mystery in front of you. A child once asked, "If you keep counting forever, do the numbers ever stop?" The adult paused, then said, "No, but you can stop any time." The child thought about that, then quietly nodded, like they understood something about limits and the gift of choosing when to rest. Infinity teaches us that more isn't always more. Sometimes it's the realization that there's no such thing as complete, that there's always another question, another room, another turn down a hallway that never ends. And strangely, that can be comforting, like knowing there's always space for you, even in a world that feels too full. So breathe now. Let the concept stretch around you like fog, soft, formless, without edges. Let yourself become just a little lost in it, not in confusion, but in gentle wonder. You don't need to grasp infinity. You just need to walk alongside it for a while. And now, with your thoughts loosened from borders, we'll wander somewhere even stranger. A paradox, not of abundance, but of total absence. We're heading next into the strange silence where even being breaks down. The paradox of nothingness. The nothing that is. Close your eyes for a moment and rest in the space between thoughts. That quiet. Is it nothing? Or is it something too subtle to name? Philosophers have long feared and revered the concept of nothing, a true void, not darkness, not silence, not even absence, just not. And yet every time we reach for this emptiness, we find it slipping through our fingers, For even in the most vacant spaces, something stirs. Physics confirms the betrayal of the void. In quantum fields, what we once called a vacuum is now known to be alive with fluctuation. Virtual particles appear and disappear within trillionths of a second, like breath on glass. They leave no mark, and yet they shape the universe. This seething potential, this trembling zero, is not nothing. It's the background hum of possibility. Late at night, when one voice says, "I feel hollow," and another replies, "That hollowness is still a place," we realize the paradox. Emptiness is not inert. It's dynamic, pregnant with creation. "Didn't the universe come from nothing?" she asks, curled into the couch, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly. "Maybe it didn't," he replies, eyes half closed. "Maybe it came from a silence that already knew how to sing." We are taught to think of nothingness as the opposite of being, but in many traditions, the void is sacred, not the absence of life, but the womb of it. In Taoism, the Tao is described as the nameless, formless origin. In mystical Judaism, Ein Sof is the infinite nothing from which all light unfolds. In Buddhism, emptiness, shunyata, is not despair, but liberation, a release from fixed form, an opening. So if the universe never came from nothing, perhaps it always was. Not in the way we understand existing, but in a quieter way. Like a field that lies fallow, not barren, but waiting, ready, watching. What does that say about you? When you sit in stillness, when all thought subsides, what remains? Not a void, but a presence that no word can reach. Maybe the truest nothing is not empty. Maybe it's just too full to be seen. And in that fertile darkness, let your breath slow. Don't fill the silence. Feel it. Because in the next step of our journey, we'll follow the thread deeper into the oldest question of all. If everything springs from the void, could it all, in truth, be one? The Monism Paradox. There's a strange comfort in stillness, not in the absence of sound, but in the realization that every sound belongs. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of your floorboards, even the soft breath you didn't know you were holding. None of it is outside you. None of it is foreign. A man once sat on a stone bench outside a train station, brushing crumbs from his coat. Another man, late and breathless, asked if the train had already passed. The first smiled without speaking. And in that silence, both somehow knew they were asking the same question, just in different forms. Monism is the idea that there is no real division, that behind the appearances of chairs and thoughts and thunderstorms lies a singular essence, one undivided thing, or perhaps no thing at all. In Hindu Advaita, it's called Brahman. In Mahayana Buddhism, it's emptiness, alive and full. In quantum field theory, it shows up as vibrations, different dances, same stage. But if everything is truly one, where does change happen? How does anything become anything else? You brush your hand across a bedsheet. Is that sensation something you feel, or something the universe feels, through the brief shape you call you? If awareness is not yours, but awareness itself, then even this question may be just the universe wondering about its own reflection. In a grocery store once, a girl asked the cashier why the scanner made a beep every time. The cashier shrugged and said, "So the machine knows it was heard." And maybe that's all we ever do, make sounds to feel real, to echo through the one listening self. If there is only one field, one substance, one awareness playing at hide and seek with itself, then to know another is to meet yourself in disguise. The glance of a stranger in a hallway isn't just a meeting. It's an act of remembering. You weren't two travelers crossing paths. You were one awareness waking up in two directions. this isn't the kind of thought you chase. It's the kind that lingers behind your breath. Like when someone lets you merge in traffic with a wave of the hand, or when you hold the door open, not because you must, but because something deep and wordless says, "Of course." And yet, there's a paradox buried here. If all is one, then what is suffering? Who gets hurt when the ocean crashes against its own shore? What does it mean to do good or harm if every actor and every act belong to the same dream? We'll arrive at that mystery soon enough, but for now, let your boundaries soften. Let them fade like footsteps in the sand at high tide. You are not an echo. You are the mountain that made the echo possible. Next, we'll open a door that has never closed, the timeless puzzle of good and evil, and whether it can exist in a world where everything is already one. The problem of evil. Late at night, when the city softens and your thoughts unfold like petals in reverse, one question arrives like a shadow that cannot be banished by light. If the universe is governed by a benevolent and powerful presence, why is there suffering? Why does cancer bloom in the lungs of a child? Why do tyrants age in comfort while the kind go hungry? The problem of evil doesn't simply live in books. It stares back at us from every hospital bed, every battlefield, every quiet injustice we pass on the street. A woman's voice breaks the silence, soft, worn with experience. You ever wonder why bad things happen to good people? The man beside her sighs, not with frustration, but with fatigue, all the time. Sometimes I think, maybe pain is part of the story. Maybe it pushes the plot forward. She nods slowly, staring into her tea. But couldn't the author write a better story? This question, ancient and aching, lies at the heart of theodicy, the attempt to reconcile divine goodness with a broken world. Is suffering a test, a purifying fire that tempers the soul? Or is it collateral damage in a universe that's not as carefully curated as we hoped? Some theologians suggest that free will necessitates the possibility of evil, that without the chance to choose wrong, goodness would be meaningless. Others say, evil exists to make space for growth, for resilience, for compassion to rise. But even those answers tremble under the weight of real grief. And perhaps that's the true paradox. Evil doesn't only challenge our intellect, it wounds the spirit. And in that wound, something shifts. When we suffer, or when we witness suffering, we're forced to confront the most intimate and unbearable questions. What kind of world is this? What kind of people are we? Do we rage? Do we retreat? Or do we rise? My brother didn't deserve what happened, the man says quietly. No, she replies, but you stayed with him. That was your answer. Evil doesn't give us clarity. It gives us crossroads. It asks, will you turn bitter? Or will you deepen? Will you shut down? Or will you show up? Some philosophers argue that asking why may be the wrong approach altogether, that evil isn't a problem to solve, but a presence to respond to. Not a riddle, but a responsibility. A reminder that in a universe that contains cruelty, we are given the power, however small, to be kind. So breathe now, with your chest rising and falling like slow tides beneath the stars. Let your thoughts hold both weight and wonder. You don't need to resolve the paradox tonight. You only need to rest in its presence, letting your heart remain open despite it all. The next mind trap awaits, not rooted in suffering, but in pure abstraction. We drift now into the mystery of truths that create themselves and ask, what happens when reason turns inward? The Bootstrap Paradox. There's something unsettling about things with no beginning, a song with no first note, a river with no source, or a book with no author, just pages that seem to have always been written. One evening, a woman steps into a second-hand bookstore, half asleep from a long train ride. She opens a dusty volume, only to find her own handwriting inside. Not just notes, but the full manuscript of a book she hasn't yet written. The title? Echoes from Elsewhere. She blinks, feels the pulse in her wrist, then buys it. That's the paradox. The Bootstrap Paradox plays with the edges of logic. It says, what if a thing, an object, an idea, a message, has no clear beginning? You bring it into the past, where it becomes the reason it exists in your present. Like a loop coiling through time with no anchor, no origin, no cause. You found the book because you wrote it. You wrote the book because you found it. A quiet voice at the back of your mind might ask, but who wrote it first? There isn't a first, and that's where the mind starts to slip, gently, like fog rolling off a windowsill at dawn. It's not just about time travel. It's about stories, identities, meanings that feel older than our telling of them. Some truths feel like that, not invented, but remembered, like you're not writing them, but recovering them. One person turns to another on the subway, eyes half closed beneath fluorescent lights, and says, "You ever feel like you've heard a thought before you thought it?" The other smiles without turning. Sometimes I dream a conversation, and then have it the next week. They ride in silence after that. But something has softened. Not everything needs an origin to feel real. Maybe the universe itself is one long bootstrap. Maybe the laws that guide it were never made, just found. Or maybe reality hums with truths that loop back on themselves, truths that write the hands that write them. And what about you? If your thoughts arise from memories, but those memories came from who you are, then who exactly authored the loop of your identity? It's tempting to chase beginnings, to ask where the story starts. But in the quiet of night, when time unspools its grip, there's comfort in the spiral. Maybe some stories were never meant to begin. They simply are. Let yourself rest inside that curve. No first cause, no final author, just presence, echoing through itself. And next, we ask, if everything flows from something else, then have you ever truly chosen anything at all? The illusion of free will. She paused, her hand hovering over the cookie jar. Did I just choose that, or did it choose me? She asked softly. He laughed, not mockingly, but with a quiet sort of recognition. Maybe your neurons decided 5 seconds ago, and now you're just catching up. It's a strange thing to feel yourself choose, to say yes to a desire or no to a distraction, only to learn that long before that conscious flicker of decision, your brain was already preparing the action. In the lab, electrodes whisper secrets. The motor cortex lights up a full second before we think, now I'll move. That second isn't just time, it's revelation. What if the moment we believe we're in charge is actually just a point in the script, after the story has already been written? And still, we feel it, the tilt of the will, the sense of agency. But if the cause lies beneath awareness, in the quiet machinery of the brain, are we the author or just the narrator? She leaned back on the couch, eyes tracing the slow ceiling fan. So, if my brain decides before I do, am I just watching my own life like a movie? He didn't answer right away. Maybe. Or maybe you're the screen, not the watcher. Maybe you're the whole theater. Free will is a comforting myth. The idea that each path we take is laid down by our own hand. But when decision becomes prediction, When biology whispers before consciousness speaks, freedom becomes mist. And yet, in that mist, there is a kind of grace. Perhaps the illusion isn't a flaw, but a space, a breathing room between the arising of thought and our response to it. We may not summon each wave in the ocean of the mind, but we can learn to surf, or simply float. You are not less human for lacking control. You are more tender, more vast, for realizing you never needed it. The paradox is not that we have no freedom. It's that freedom may lie not in choosing what appears, but in how gently we allow it to pass, like clouds crossing a still sky, like breath leaving the body. No resistance, no judgment, just presence. He reached for the cookie, then stopped. Maybe I won't. She raised an eyebrow. Or maybe your brain already knew that too. They both laughed, and for a moment, the illusion didn't need to be broken. It was beautiful enough just to witness. Now, breathe out. Let the need to control unravel like a thread in twilight. What comes next will stretch your idea of space itself and ask, can anything truly be far if all things are here, within awareness? The Nonlocality Enigma. There's something unnerving and oddly comforting about realizing that space might not be what it seems, that the distance between two things might not mean what we think it does. In the quiet stillness of quantum mechanics, there's a strange entanglement that won't let go of our understanding. Two particles, light years apart, reacting as one, not because of a signal, not because of speed, but because somehow they are one, a unity that ignores geography. So you're telling me, one friend murmurs as they pass a steaming bowl of noodles across the table, that touching this chopstick here could affect something in another galaxy? The other shrugs gently, smiling. Maybe it already did. Maybe it always was. Einstein hated the idea. Spooky action at a distance, he called it, as if the universe had a ghostly sense of humor. But experiments now whisper otherwise. No wires, no travel, just a flicker of knowing between two things that were once close and never truly parted. In the stillness of thought, this becomes more than physics. It becomes personal, because if particles can remain bonded across impossible divides, what about people? What about moments? What if a passing glance, once shared, hums through time like a thread pulled tight beneath memory? At a quiet park bench, someone opens a book. A stranger walks by, pauses, then says, "I read that same line yesterday." They nod, then move on. But something lingers, not just coincidence, but a signal, faint and wide as starlight. Perhaps connection was never about proximity. Perhaps it's about coherence. Patterns that hum in sync even from opposite ends of a life, even when the people no longer speak, even when they never did. And so the illusion begins to crack. That your thoughts are yours alone. That your choices live in a sealed chamber. Maybe what you feel, or even what you dream, stretches beyond your skin, like breath touching the cold air before it fades. A soft question rises. If we're all entangled, does that mean I never really left you? Maybe we never began apart, the other replies, folding their hands around a cup, like the warmth needs somewhere to stay. The philosopher might say we're fooled by scale. We see separateness because it helps us move through space. But beneath that, beneath city blocks and solar systems, there is one fabric. Tug it here, and it shivers there. The heart hears this before the brain does. In the way a song from childhood brings tears before you remember the lyrics, in the silence that follows a name spoken too softly to ignore, let this idea wash over you, not like a wave, but like dew, quiet, weightless, and everywhere at once. There are no edges tonight, no final distances, just this steady hum beneath everything, connecting every breath to the next. Now drift into the silence between things, the space that isn't empty, the gap that holds it all. And next, we step into a quieter illusion still, where even your sense of self may begin to loosen. The question isn't what you're connected to, but whether you were ever truly separate at all. The paradox of personal identity. Close your eyes for a moment. Think back to your childhood, the sound of your laughter, the shape of your hands, the people you loved. Do you still feel like that same person? Or is that child more like a character in a story, one you remember but no longer are? This is the paradox of personal identity. We move through life in a body that changes, a mind that shifts, a memory that rewrites itself. Every cell in your body regenerates over time. The molecules that made you 10 years ago have mostly vanished. Desires evolve, beliefs flip, pain fades, and sometimes so do names, places, and whole years. And yet, we still say I, as if this I is solid, whole, continuous. But what holds it all together? Some say it's memory that forms identity, but memory is unreliable, fragile like smoke. Neuroscience shows how we misremember events, blend timelines, even invent whole scenes. So if memory can't be trusted, can it really be the thread of self? Others point to the body, but your body today is not the one you had as a teen or a toddler. Your face has changed. Your voice has deepened or softened. Even your gut bacteria, the invisible parts of you, are not constant. So what remains? There's a quiet theory among philosophers that identity is not a thing, but a process, a useful illusion, a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the changing tides within. Like a flame passed from candle to candle, we carry the feeling of self, but the fire never stays still. The you of yesterday is not lost, but neither is it preserved. It's more like a version, replaced by a newer draft each moment. A couple sits quietly on their porch, tea in hand. "Do you think you're the same person I married?" she asks, half smiling. He pauses, thoughtful. "In some ways, no, but in others, yes. I still love you, and I remember choosing you. Maybe that's enough." She nods. Maybe love is what stitches the story together. What if that is the answer? Not continuity of body or mind, but a thread of affection, attention, intention? Maybe the self isn't an object, but an echo. Maybe we are not singular beings, but moments in a song, ripples in a stream. Let that thought settle. Let the edges of you soften. Like fog on glass at dawn, identity doesn't need to be gripped, only noticed, watched, felt. Because up next, we step even further from form, into a place where everything may exist, and yet somehow, so does nothing at all. The Modal Realism Trap. You are here, or at least, that's what it feels like. The hum of this moment, the softness of the air on your skin, the quiet pull of gravity in your bones. This is your world. But beneath that simple certainty, a question blooms quietly. What if this is only one of many? The philosopher David Lewis didn't just ask that question. He answered it boldly. He claimed that every possible world, every alternate version of reality, is just as real as the one you're lying in now. Not just hypothetically real, literally real. A world where you chose the train instead of the car. A world where you never met the person you love. A world where you were born in a different century. Or not at all. Modal realism is the idea that the universe doesn't stop at what happened. It blossoms in every direction, like a tree with infinite branches. each decision, each chance, each flicker of what could have been exists somewhere, playing out fully, endlessly. A girl in a coffee shop says to the barista, "If I had woken up a minute later, I wouldn't be here right now." He shrugs with a grin. Maybe you're not. Maybe the version of you who stayed asleep is dreaming this whole conversation. And somehow, that feels oddly comforting. Because if all those lives are real, then nothing was ever wasted. Every missed opportunity, every closed door, found a home in some other thread. You are not the sum of your regrets. You are simply this version of you, awake in this strand of time, this flicker of breath. But here's the paradox that rests like a feather on your mind. If every possibility is real, what makes this one meaningful? Maybe it's this, that you can feel this moment, that your heart ticks softly in your chest, that the silence around you isn't empty, but full of presence. Not because other worlds don't matter, but because this one is the only one you can touch. A father leans on the doorway, watching his daughter fall asleep after a long day. She almost didn't exist, he whispers to himself. But here she is. His voice is quieter than the ticking clock, but it anchors the universe. So, what does modal realism teach us as we drift toward sleep? That you don't need to chase the lives you didn't live. They're already out there, blooming in silence. You're not missing out, you're unfolding. And what makes this thread sacred is not that it was chosen, but that you are here, sensing it, right now. Let yourself rest in that truth. This moment is not just one among many. It is yours. And from this stillness, we turn to a stranger paradox still, where the wall between the possible and impossible begins to melt, like frost under a gentle sun. The Omniscience Paradox. There's a silence that surrounds the word all-knowing, a silence not of finality, but of stillness before a question too delicate to break. If something, or someone, knows everything, what does that mean for the experience of not knowing? Does it vanish completely? Or does it still linger like a scent memory in a sealed room? If a being truly knows everything, then it must understand ignorance. Not just conceptually, but intimately. It must know what it feels like to wonder, to doubt, to reach. And yet, if it feels ignorance, doesn't that mean it has, even for a moment, ceased to be omniscient? This is the coil at the center of the paradox. To be perfect is to be whole, but wholeness, if it's truly complete, must embrace its own absence. The divine must know loss. Certainty must know the tremble of questioning. Knowledge must be able to hold ignorance in its palm, not as a stranger, but as a friend long understood. So, you're saying God can't be curious? Not in the way you are, but maybe curiosity is part of the divine, not outside it. Then wouldn't that mean God doesn't know everything? Or maybe knowing everything includes the knowing of not knowing, like how a fire knows what it is to be cold, by giving warmth away. This paradox reveals something gentle beneath its sharp edge, that perhaps perfection is not a fixed point, but a dance between opposites, not a cold encyclopedia of facts, but a living question. And in that question, we too find ourselves. Because don't we all, in some small way, long to know everything, not to control the world, but to soothe the ache of not understanding it? Yet what if that ache is sacred? What if curiosity is not a flaw, but a form of worship? What if not knowing is the very reason we ask, wonder, and reach toward stars we may never touch? As you breathe now, let go of the need to arrive. Let questions hang like lanterns in the dark. Omniscience may not be a destination. It might be the path itself. A divine humility that kneels, not because it lacks, but because it listens. And so we rest not in knowledge, but in reverent unknowing. Not all things are meant to be understood. Some are simply meant to be felt. Close your eyes. The next segment will take you to a deeper riddle. The first question ever asked, why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there something rather than nothing? There's a moment in every long night when thought grows so quiet it nearly forgets itself. That's where we begin. A question not whispered, but woven into the background hum of existence. Why is there something, anything at all? You look around. Walls, breathing, the slight pressure of a blanket, maybe a faint glow from a screen. All this, something. And yet, no matter how much you trace it back, no matter how many becauses you collect, there's always one missing. The first, the one that doesn't lean on anything. Heidegger once called this the most basic and profound question. Leibniz wondered if the answer was God or necessity or just the simplest possibility. But whatever caused this moment to exist, we're left with the same mystery, something, instead of the clean, symmetrical hush of nothingness. Hey, someone once said to me as we stood beside a vending machine that had eaten their money. Doesn't it ever seem weird that there's even a machine here to steal from? I laughed, but he meant it. We talk so often about how things happen, we forget to ask why there are things at all. Science, in its brilliance, maps the unfolding of the universe. The Big Bang, inflation, particles cooling into atoms, atoms bonding into stars. But it starts after the curtain has already lifted. No one knows who or what drew it open, or if it even was drawn. Maybe there was no silence before the music, no blank canvas before the first brushstroke. Maybe the act of questioning assumes a stage that doesn't exist. Sometimes I think the question only feels so haunting because we're wired to expect stories to begin. But existence might not be a story. It might be a song with no first note, a ripple with no origin. Someone once told me that the most honest sound they ever heard was the pause between footsteps on snow. Not the crunch, but the silence that held it. Maybe that's what being is. Not an answer, not a thing, but the silence that holds all things. And in daily life, we still behave as if it makes sense. We refill our water bottles, we double knot our shoes, we text someone back because we said we would. All of this carried out in a universe whose very presence has no clear reason. And still, coffee brews, suns rise. So rest now in that unreasonable comfort, in the quiet miracle of existence that needs no permission to be here. Maybe the question isn't waiting for an answer. Maybe it's a cradle, something we return to when all our explanations fall asleep. Let that cradle hold you gently now. Don't reach for why. Don't rush to understand. Just listen to the hush behind every sound, the being behind every thought. In the next segment, we'll slip deeper into a paradox where reality itself begins to blur, and we wonder, what if all this is just a dream dreaming itself? The dream argument. Have you ever woken up still tasting the memory of a kiss that never happened, or hearing the echo of a voice you've never known? In the quiet theater of your own mind, dreams play without permission. And for a few moments, sometimes hours, they feel real. The soft gravity of the floor, the pull of a lover's gaze, the sun warming your skin. And then, just like that, it dissolves. René Descartes once asked a deceptively simple question. How do you know you're not dreaming right now? He wasn't being dramatic. He was being surgical. What he uncovered wasn't just a philosophical curiosity, but a rift in the foundation of certainty itself. Because if dreams can mimic reality, sight, sound, touch, emotion, with such fidelity, what separates the real from the illusion? If a dream can trick all your senses at once, how can you trust them when you're awake? Modern neuroscience doesn't bring us much comfort. In fact, it complicates the matter. Brain scans show that the activity of a dreaming mind isn't vastly different from that of a conscious one. The same neural circuits flare, the same chemicals swirl. To your brain, dreaming is just another kind of being. So then, what if consciousness doesn't stop dreaming when you wake up? What if this world, your job, your bed, this voice, is simply the longest dream you've ever had? Babe, do you ever get that weird feeling? Like the day isn't real? Yeah, she says, brushing her teeth. Like it's all just pretending to be itself? He nods. Exactly. Like it's too smooth. Like someone pressed render. She spits into the sink, wipes her mouth, then smirks. Well, if it is a dream, at least I'm dreaming with you. He laughs. Unless I'm the only one here. She flicks the light off. Then dream better. I want coffee in the morning. There's something tender in that thought, that maybe we are all just figments in each other's imaginations, that maybe our lives don't need to be real to be meaningful. Maybe what matters isn't waking up, but how we dream together. Because even a dream can hold love. Even a fantasy can break your heart. So let go, gently, of the need to verify. Let your fingers unclench from the edges of the world. Reality, like a dream, doesn't need your approval to keep existing. It just flows on, scene to scene, without explanation. Let your grip on the real loosen like sand between fingers. Because up ahead is another question that sounds like a riddle and echoes like a forest. If no one hears it, did it ever make a sound? The observer's dilemma. There's a hush to the night that feels intentional, like the air itself is holding its breath, not because it must, but because you're here to feel it. Somewhere, a kettle clicks as it cools, a light flickers in an empty hallway, and you find yourself wondering, is any of this happening if no one is watching? The old question returns in new form. If a tree falls in a forest with no one to hear it, does it make a sound? Not just a riddle for children or poets. This is a crack in the surface of certainty. Because physically, sound is vibration, waves in air. But sound, as we know it, requires an ear to catch those waves and a brain to name them. So what is it really when no one's around? Do you think the fridge light stays on when the door's closed? Maybe it only lights up because we expect it to. They both smile, half joking. Yet neither one is sure anymore. Quantum theory adds a new layer. Subatomic particles don't settle into a state until they're observed. Until then, they float, a haze of probabilities. They could be here, or there, or both. But the moment someone measures them, they choose, as if they were waiting for attention before committing to reality, as if the universe blushes slightly when caught in the act. One night in a quiet cafe, a woman says to the stranger across from her, "Sometimes I feel like the world's only real when someone sees me in it." He nods. "And when no one's watching?" "I'm not sure. Maybe I become more thought than person." She stirs her tea, and steam curls like a question mark. It's unsettling, this idea that reality might not be fixed, that things might need an observer to be fully themselves. But it's also gentle. It means your presence matters, not in some grand, heroic way, but in the quiet architecture of being. When you open your eyes, the room arranges itself. When you listen, the silence shifts slightly to meet your attention. The observer's dilemma is not a puzzle to be solved, but a mirror that changes when you look. You, who watches, who notices, who lies still with thoughts half formed and breath half held. Maybe you are not watching the world. Maybe it's watching you, just as intently, waiting to know itself through your gaze. Let the thoughts settle like dusk falling on a field. No conclusion needed, just presence. Breathe with it. Because next, we ask something even harder. What happens when we feel completely sure, but we're wrong? The uncertainty of certainty. How do you know what you known isn't wrong? It's a quiet question, almost too gentle to unsettle. But it should, because every belief we hold, whether it's about the world, ourselves, or the people we love, is stacked atop others. We call them facts, we call them logic, we call them memory, but each of those foundations can shift, crack, or dissolve. Memory is famously unreliable. Logic bends when its premises are flawed. And what we call facts are sometimes just patterns we've seen too often to question. Certainty, then, may be nothing more than repetition with confidence. The more you've told yourself something, the more likely you are to believe it. And when enough people repeat it with you, it starts to feel like truth. But is it? Or is it just a rhythm, soothing in its familiarity, lulling the mind into comfort rather than clarity? Karl Popper, a thinker who made doubt a virtue, warned of the dangers of beliefs that can't be questioned. He called them unfalsifiable, ideas so tightly sealed that no evidence could shake them. And ironically, those are often the ideas we're most loyal to. They live in the background of our minds, shaping choices, emotions, and identities. We rarely notice them. They don't shout, they whisper. And in that fog, we sometimes mistake the echo of our own convictions for the voice of truth. Two friends sit together late at night. One stares out the window and murmurs, "I used to be sure about everything. Now I'm not sure about anything." The other smiles and replies, "Maybe that means you're finally seeing clearly." Perhaps truth isn't a castle of certainty, but a path through uncertainty, foggy, winding, and full of moments that force us to pause, to soften, to reconsider. It's not weakness to say, "I don't know." It might be the only honest thing we ever say. So breathe into that space. Let go of needing to be right. Float for a moment in not knowing, because next we'll step into a realm where even space might not be real. The Holographic Universe. Some nights, it feels like the ceiling is just a thought away, that the stars overhead could be folded down like the lid of a jewelry box. And in a sense, perhaps they can. There's a quiet theory nestled within the deeper folds of modern physics, quiet but profound. It whispers that the universe might not be what it appears, that this entire three-dimensional world, with its textures and distances and solid certainties, could actually be a kind of projection, that we are living in something akin to a hologram, where what we call depth is just a clever trick of light and code on a two-dimensional surface far beyond our reach. A man on the bus once said to a stranger beside him, "Funny, isn't it? How far away the moon looks, but it always seems to follow you." And the woman replied without looking up, "Maybe it never moved. Maybe it's us who keep pretending we're in different places." It's easy to take space for granted. You stretch your arm, and the distance feels real. You walk from your kitchen to your bedroom, and the motion feels linear. But what if all of that movement, separation, direction, is just a mental arrangement? A clever illusion, orchestrated by consciousness to tell itself a story it can understand. Some physicists suggest that the entire universe could be encoded, not unlike how a film is stored on a strip of tape. The images feel deep, expansive, filled with volume, but they are born from flatness, just layers of information unfolding into illusion. Two people sit across from each other at a table. One says, "Do you ever think we're not really here? Like this room is just wrapping paper and something else is inside?" The other replies, "Only when it's quiet enough to hear myself wondering." If space is a construct, then so is distance. So is loneliness. The people you miss, they might not be far at all. Not if location is simply a belief held in place by memory and perspective. Perhaps even longing is holographic, a stretched echo of togetherness, refracted through emotion. Even the sensation of here and there could be part of the code. Not lies, but conveniences. Not fabrications, but useful distortions, like stage lights painting shadows on a wall so the story feels fuller. Rest your eyes now. Let the lines blur. Let walls stop being walls and instead become soft horizons of experience, folding in, folding out. Maybe the room you're in is just a pause in the pattern, a ripple in the projection. And maybe the heart of space is not distance, but rhythm, a kind of breathing, a pulse that doesn't separate us, but synchronizes us. As you drift, let this thought soften you, that everything you see, feel, and touch might be part of one great canvas, painted not with colors, but with questions. And now, as you let your awareness loosen like threads unwinding from a spool, we'll step beyond even space itself into a stranger paradox, one where meaning, not matter, begins to fade. The Watcher Paradox. In the stillness of a late-night room, when the hum of the world fades into background breath, a curious thing begins to happen. You catch yourself thinking. Not just thinking, but noticing the thought. A moment of inner pause. I am aware that I am thinking. But that awareness, soft and silent, who does it belong to? Who is it that watches the one who watches? A gentle voice breaks the hush. Hey, do you ever think about who's doing the thinking? Sometimes, especially when I can't sleep. Like, who's the me behind the me? Each time we turn inward, we expect to find something solid, a core identity, an inner throne where the true self sits, observing. But each step inward seems to unveil yet another watcher. You notice a thought, then notice yourself noticing it, then catch that too. A hall of mirrors with no clear origin. The closer you get, the more it vanishes into itself. This loop is not just poetic, it's woven into both philosophy and brain science. Meditative traditions across centuries speak of the illusion of the I, and neuroscience echoes this. No single place in the brain serves as the command center. There's no CEO neuron behind the curtain, just layered processes monitoring other processes, like waves folding into waves. So, there's no real self at the center? Maybe it's more like a flame. You see it, you feel its warmth, but there's nothing to hold, just motion, just flicker. The self might not be a thing, but a rhythm, an echo chasing its own origin, a ripple looping back into the pond. Not an object, but a verb. Not someone, but something that happens, like breath. It rises, it falls, and it vanishes. Each moment of watching is a soft collapse of identity into awareness. And perhaps that's the secret. The more you search for the core, the more it disappears. Not because it's hiding, but because it's never been a thing at all. What remains is quiet presence, the part of you that notices but never speaks, the gentle drift of your thoughts before sleep and the space between them. No name, no shape, just the observer's whisper, fading into the calm. So don't chase it. Let the search dissolve into stillness. The watcher doesn't need to be found to be felt, because next, we leave even observation behind and enter a puzzle made not of thought, but of its reflection. A question that folds back on you like a mirror within a mirror. Close your eyes, feel yourself fading, and notice. Who is it that just noticed that? The question that watches you back. Some questions don't arrive to be solved. They arrive to undo the very need for solving. They sit across from you like a quiet stranger at dusk, still, patient, unmoving, not waiting for your answer, but for your stillness. Do you ever feel like a question is asking you something? She asked, brushing dust off a bench before sitting down. He smiled without looking. Yeah, like it's not waiting for words, just whether you're ready. There are questions that, the more you chase them, the further you are from them, not because they're difficult, but because they fold back into you. They're not walls to climb, they're mirrors held at an angle, tilted just enough so that what you see is not a solution, but your own searching gaze. Philosophy has a name for these: self-referencing epistemic loops. Questions like, who am I? Or why is there anything at all? They don't point to facts, but to consciousness itself. Not content, but container. Not the thought, but the thinker. Sit with one long enough, and you'll notice something subtle. It's not the question that's changing. It's you. He once tried journaling his thoughts about being. 10 pages in, he noticed. His handwriting had shifted. She told him, maybe that's the point. It's not about what you write. It's about who does the writing when no one is pretending. These loops don't function like puzzles. There's no key, no final insight that ends the inquiry. Instead, they soften the need for an answer until you're just there, present, undivided, and inexplicably okay with the not knowing. Like Zen koans whispered in mountain monasteries, their value isn't intellectual, it's experiential. What is the sound of one hand clapping? What was your original face before your parents were born? Questions that unravel the mind just enough to let the heart speak. Not with language, but with stillness. Sometimes people answer them without knowing. I don't know why I came in here, someone says at the doorway, looking into a room they didn't intend to enter. And yet, they pause, breathe, as if the air held something forgotten. He said once at a traffic light, maybe I'm not lost. Maybe I've just stopped pretending I know where I was going. And maybe that's what these questions do. They stop the pretending. They don't give you answers. They return you to what's already true beneath all the asking, a kind of intimate honesty, a kind of peace that doesn't require understanding. Let the question watch you. Let it meet your eyes like the reflection on a lake, shimmering not with content, but with quiet presence. You don't need to respond. You don't need to analyze. Just let the surface settle. In the hush that follows, you'll notice a new kind of clarity. One without words, one without edges. Let go of asking. Let the question dissolve like breath on a mirror. In the next segment, we descend into a strange twilight, where the boundary between self and other begins to blur, not with confusion, but with wonder. The illusion of otherness. A quiet question floats up like mist. Are you truly alone in there? Or have you never been separate at all? The thought lingers, soft as breath against the skin, And somewhere in the distance between two people passing each other on a silent morning train, something unspoken connects them. A glance, a shift in posture, a sigh held back. Something familiar. We tend to think of ourselves as sealed, wrapped in skin, cradled in thought, carrying an eye like a stone in our pocket. But neuroscience and ancient philosophy now whisper in agreement. The self is not solitary. You don't exist in isolation. You arise in relation. Your mind is not a closed room. It's a horizon that bends with the world around it. Eastern traditions have long taught this, and modern studies catch up. Your sense of identity, your preferences, memories, even the rhythm of your breath, is shaped by what surrounds you. The food you ate as a child, the language that taught your brain to think, the lullabies your grandmother hummed, the advertisements that flashed across your growing eyes. You're not an island. You're a coastline touched by endless waves. At a cafe, two friends sit facing each other. Do you ever feel like your thoughts aren't fully your own? One asks. The other smiles softly. All the time, like, I'm made of everyone I've ever met. This moment, simple and fleeting, holds a profound truth. Every boundary you think you have is more like fog than stone. Your joy doesn't begin where someone else's ends. And pain often travels without a passport. The grief of a stranger on the news may tighten something in your chest. A child's laughter on the street may warm you, even if it isn't yours to claim. So what if there are no others? What if we are not split, but refracted, like a single light glancing through a prism, appearing in different shapes and shades, but always coming from one source? Maybe the anger you feel at injustice is your deeper self recognizing its reflection. Maybe love isn't something you give, but something that remembers itself through you. Maybe we are all waves in one mind, rising and falling, forgetting and remembering. Let that idea settle now. Let your sense of boundary soften, like sand dissolving into sea foam. You are not in the world. You are the world, noticing itself. And now, as your breath slows, we drift into stranger waters, toward minds so unfamiliar, they make self and other seem like illusions drawn in dust. Alien minds. There's something strange about the way we expect the unknown to look like us. Even when we dream of alien life, we dress it in the clothes of human fear, human wonder. We picture beings with eyes, with thoughts, with questions, maybe taller, maybe greener, but still understandable. And yet, what if the truly alien is not in the body but in the mind? Do you think they'd have language like ours? Two strangers on a bench at a late-night bus stop, one sipping cold tea, the other watching stars as if waiting for an answer. Not even close, the second says, not looking away. Maybe they don't speak. Maybe they don't think in time at all. You see, our thoughts ride on rails we didn't build. Logic, sequence, memory. Those are human tools. But consciousness might come in forms we can't translate. Not just a different language, but a different geometry of mind. Like trying to explain taste to a stone, or sadness to a cloud. Perhaps there are minds that live in group formations, braided across many bodies. Our minds that drift sideways through time, remembering the future and predicting the past. Maybe their version of self flickers in and out like a radio signal, only briefly coherent. And to them, we might seem impossibly flat, like a cartoon trying to read a novel. I once read something, the first stranger says softly, that an octopus thinks through its arms. The second smiles. We're already surrounded by alien minds, and we call it Earth. And in that still moment, even the silence feels intelligent. If we ever meet life beyond this world, the first shock might not be their eyes, but that their questions aren't our questions, that curiosity isn't curiosity, that what we call consciousness is only a provincial dialect. This thought can be unsettling, but it's also freeing, because if there are ways of knowing we can't yet conceive, then there are parts of reality still untouched by fear, still unshaped by human expectation. There are ways of being, of sensing, that wait patiently, beyond the limits of our metaphors. The mind clings to the known, like a child to its mother's coat in a storm. But what if the storm is kindness too? What if the unfamiliar isn't a threat, but a mirror bent by light we've never seen? A hand rests gently on your shoulder. You don't know whose, but it doesn't ask for understanding. It only says, you don't have to know. You only have to feel. So let your grip loosen. Let the need to comprehend fall like leaves. Because knowing isn't always the way in. Sometimes, to truly arrive, you must be seen, without needing to explain yourself. And now, softly, as thought dims and form wavers, we step into the in-between, that quiet borderland where the mind begins to dissolve and meaning becomes mist. Sleep may come, or not. You're allowed to drift. You're allowed to return. And if some part of you still listens, even as your breath deepens, know this: the universe may be full of minds we'll never grasp, but right now, yours is gently being held. Next, we arrive at the doorway between waking and dreaming, where even time forgets which way to run. The Hypnagogic Gate. It begins in the hush between breaths, that strange moment when your body is still in the room, but your mind has started to wander elsewhere, softly, silently, without permission. The world loses its edges. Sounds stretch and melt. Light blurs. This is not sleep yet, but something more delicate, something more ancient. The hypnagogic state, neither fully awake nor truly asleep, unfolds like a dream you haven't had yet. Here, thoughts flicker like candle flames. They appear unformed, not yet shaped by language or reason. A color without a name, a sentence without syntax, a face you've never seen, but somehow recognize. You aren't thinking in the usual way anymore. You are witnessing thought before it thinks itself, perception without rules, imagination without limits. Have you ever heard music when you're falling asleep? One voice asks in the dark, barely more than a whisper. Yeah, the other replies, slow and quiet. But it's not really music. It's like someone else remembering a song I never knew. The Hypnagogic Gate has always fascinated mystics, shamans, and seekers. The Greeks called this space theophany, where the gods appear. Surrealists tried to paint it. Poets tried to bottle it. Some neuroscientists study the peculiar activity of the brain in this state, watching as it dances between beta waves and theta waves like a tide returning to sea. The structure of self begins to loosen. Logic slips away, and yet, something more honest begins to speak, not in sentences, but in symbols, not in answers, but in gestures. You may see flashes of a place you've never been, or hear a language that doesn't exist. You might feel as though you're remembering a life that was never yours. And in these fragments, in these non-linear impressions, lies something more raw than clarity. It is not understanding, not confusion, not even dreaming. It is something earlier than all of them, like the mind reverting to its elemental form, liquid thought before it hardens into identity. What if this is the real me? The voice asks again. The one who shows up only when no one's watching? Maybe, the other says. Or maybe This is just where me disappears. Philosophers like Henry Bergson suggested that consciousness has multiple layers and that pure intuition, untouched by intellect, is accessible only in states like this. It's not that the hypnagogic state reveals truth, it's that it shows how thin the veil of our everyday reality truly is, that the self, as we know it, might be a construct built on wakefulness, and when wakefulness wanes, so too does the illusion of control. Here, we're not trying to make sense of the world, we're simply letting the world pass through us. The temptation, of course, is to cling, to hold on to the voices, the faces, the vivid whispers, and try to decipher them. But this place doesn't reward grasping. It asks for release. It doesn't speak in answers. It hums in riddles. And like a ripple vanishing into still water, its wisdom lives only in its passing. So float here. Drift gently. Let whatever comes, come, and whatever fades, fade. There's no lesson to memorize, no pattern to decode, only presence, only softness. The gate is not a puzzle, it's a lullaby, and as it slowly closes behind you, the final stretch of your journey begins. Soon, we'll cross into the last 10 visions, each one softer than the last. Let your mind rest now. Let it slip into the deep. The questions can wait. Consciousness without content. Try it now. Let everything fall away. Name, image, sound, even breath as identity. What's left isn't nothing. It's something deeper than anything. Awareness without decoration. Most of us go through our days with consciousness always pointing toward a noise, a memory, a task, a worry, like a flashlight forever shining outward, lighting up objects and calling that the world. But what if we turned it inward, or better yet, let the beam itself dissolve? Do you ever just feel awake, but there's nothing to feel awake about? One voice asks quietly, fingers curled around a cup of warm tea. The other looks out the window. Like when you wake in the dark before morning, and for a moment there's no thought yet, just space. This moment is rare, but not unreachable. It arises in the cracks, between one thought ending and the next, not yet beginning. In deep meditation, or in that soft golden second before sleep pulls you under, consciousness, stripped of all the things it's usually busy with, reveals itself not as a tool, but as a field, open, unbound, unburdened. There's no story here, no me reflecting on my life, no labels, not even silence, because silence still implies a contrast with sound. This is prior, before any comparison, before even the need to compare. Try holding that space for a moment now, like standing in an empty theater before any actors take the stage. The lights are low, the air is still, but something is, and whatever it is, it's aware. Is it like zoning out? The first asks again, curious but cautious. Or more like zoning in, I guess. Number not zoning anything. More like the zone itself, the second replies, and there's a strange comfort in how hard it is to put into words, as if language would only clutter what needs to be left untouched. What's profound here is not what appears in consciousness, but that consciousness doesn't require those appearances to exist. Just as the sky doesn't need birds to be sky, or the ocean waves to be ocean. They add drama, yes, but the being, the depth, was always there. This isn't the absence of mind, it's the foundation of mind, the canvas behind all paintings before any color is brushed on, and it asks for nothing. It watches thought the way a mountain watches clouds, still, silent, unmoved. When you dwell here, even briefly, the chase quiets. You no longer need to make sense of every emotion or rearrange your life story, or solve the mystery of being. For once, it's enough just to be, not becoming, not achieving, just this still awareness beneath all noise. You ever feel like the moment you try to describe it, you ruin it? One says, almost whispering. The other nods slowly. Yeah, like trying to hold a soap bubble. Better to just watch it float. Let yourself rest now, not in thought, but in what watches thought. Not in effort, but in presence. The witness behind the drama. The quiet host who asks nothing of the guests. As your breath softens and the edges of waking life blur, feel the gentle truth. Maybe you are not the storm of experience, but the space it moves through. Not the music, but the stillness it dances in. Stay here. No need to grasp. No need to explain. Next, we approach the still point, the center that never moves. The still point. Somewhere beneath the thoughts, deeper than the noise of identity, and even deeper than emotion, there is a place untouched by movement. It does not need protecting, for it has never been disturbed. You may have passed through it briefly, in the pause between two breaths, in the moment just before sleep takes you, or in the silence that follows profound loss or sudden joy. That stillness, the still point, it doesn't arrive, it is always there. Do you ever get that feeling? She asked, her voice low as they lay side by side beneath the ceiling fan. Like there's a version of you just watching everything happen. Not judging, not thinking. Just there. He nodded, letting the silence stretch. Like being in the middle of a storm, but not part of the wind or the rain. That's it, she whispered. Like the world spins around it. This presence, what some mystics call the witness, others the ground of being, isn't about doing or even being someone. It doesn't care if you're happy, angry, confused, or certain. It isn't defined by your name or your history. It's the one who knows that experience is happening, yet doesn't interfere. No past sticks to it. No future pulls it forward. It just watches from that ever-quiet eye in the storm. You don't have to find it through years of spiritual training. It isn't earned or constructed. It's revealed, once all effort falls away. When you stop needing to be anything for a moment, there it is. The still point doesn't speak, yet every silence bows to it. It doesn't plan, yet every impulse pauses before it. Not frozen, not numb, just endlessly, immeasurably calm. The power of this stillness is not in action, but in permission. It allows everything to be just as it is. It doesn't resist the noise of the mind, but it also doesn't follow it. That gentle detachment is not cold, but tender, like the ocean cradling a floating leaf. It's the quiet listener behind every thought, the place that never demands a conclusion. Thoughts may scream, memories may tug, emotions may flash, but this space stays open, always open. Is it always there? She asked him. He looked over, eyes soft. Even when we forget it's there, especially then. Sometimes the mind will try to grasp this place, to pin it down, define it, turn it into a thing. But that very effort causes the stillness to retreat. Not because it hides, but because it can't be possessed. It can only be known in the same way we know the warmth of sunlight on our skin, by surrender, not analysis. When you truly fall inward, when all striving pauses, it's there waiting. Not a new place, but a return to the one you never truly left. It isn't sleep, but it welcomes sleep like an old friend. And it isn't awakening either, though many claim to find enlightenment in its company. It's simpler than either. More like truth before words, being before identity. So tonight, As your eyes grow heavy and the world grows quiet, feel that still point gently blooming behind your thoughts. Let your breath soften, not to sleep, but to return, not to forget the day, but to touch something beneath it. And from that depth, ask gently, if this stillness is always here, have we ever truly been lost? The illusion of boundaries. You breathe in, and something not you becomes you. You exhale, and something once you becomes the world again. Quietly, unnoticed, your body moves in both directions, receiving and giving, never quite closed. And just like that, the first illusion softens, the line between inside and outside. A voice breaks the silence on a subway platform. "Hey, is that your book?" The stranger gestures with an open palm, not crossing your space, but acknowledging it. You nod. "Yeah, thanks." For a brief moment, there is no gap between you, just awareness. Then it passes. From skin to thought, we've drawn so many lines. Where I end, where you begin, what is mine, and what isn't. But the truth is quieter than that. Science tells us our cells are always in exchange with our surroundings. Breath is borrowed. Emotions ripple between bodies like waves through water. Even the thoughts you call yours are stitched from language, from memory, from the hands that once held you. Still, we cling to edges. A child learns to say me only after many times hearing you. We organize the world by sorting, labeling, defining. We draw lines not because they're real, but because they help us feel safe. And yet, somewhere in that safety, a subtle tension builds. Like trying to draw a border in the ocean. Like asking, where does the wind begin? Late one night, a woman steps out of a crowded elevator and smiles at a man still inside. She doesn't know him, but something about the moment, how their eyes met before the doors closed, feels oddly warm. No words passed, but there was recognition. What if what we call boundaries are really seams, where things are meant to touch? Neuroscience now joins the mystics in this strange realization. The self isn't a structure, it's a stream, not a fortress, but a rhythm. Every sensation filters through memory. Every decision is nudged by someone else's story, woven long before we were aware of being aware. Even solitude is shared, carried on roads built by others. And so the idea of I becomes softer, less like a rock, more like a melody. Not a container, but a current. I don't know why I keep thinking about that conversation, someone mutters while folding laundry. It wasn't even about me. Their friend shrugs gently. Maybe it touched something you hadn't named yet. There's no need to explain further. The feeling was already shared. Maybe the greatest illusion isn't that we are separate, but that we ever believed we needed to be. There is no perfect circle to draw around a human life. We leak into each other, through smiles, through silence, through memories we didn't ask for and hopes we can't fully name. Even pain crosses easily between us. That too is a kind of connection. So now, as your breath settles, feel the lines dissolve. Not erased, but softened. Not vanished, but no longer needing to be sharp. You were never alone. Not really. Not in this room. Not in this thought. Not in this moment. Now we'll fall gently into a space even lighter than this, a place that holds no form at all, the gentle nothing, the place between every place. And it waits, just beyond the next breath. The gentle nothing. There is a quiet that doesn't shout, a silence that doesn't echo, a kind of nothing that doesn't erase, but embraces. The mind, so used to clutching at thoughts, at labels, at a self it cannot find the edges of, finally let's go. And in that moment of release, what remains is not a void, not a gaping absence. It is rest, not sleep, but a waking stillness where even the need for understanding begins to fade like a ripple on still water. Do you ever just stop thinking? She asked him one evening, their faces lit by the hush of a bedside lamp. He took a long breath. Sometimes, not on purpose. It's more like thought stops holding me. There is a sacred art in letting yourself vanish, not in the morbid sense of death, but in the gentler unraveling of the identity you've carried so tightly. The I that tenses with every comparison, the I that trembles under expectations, the I that asks again and again, am I enough? It's not destroyed, it's uncoiled, like fingers that have been gripping too hard, finally relaxing. In deep meditative states, there comes a shift, not dramatic, not loud, but subtle, like noticing that a storm has passed without realizing exactly when it left. The boundaries of self soften. You are no longer narrating your existence, you are simply in it. No separation between breath and breather, between the hum of the room and the awareness that hears it. Some call this emptiness, but the term is misleading. It is not hollow. It is full in its own strange way, full of stillness, of softness, of presence unburdened by name. I think I felt it once, he said later. Walking alone after midnight, I stopped trying to think, and I wasn't scared. I wasn't even trying to feel safe. I just was. She nodded slowly, like everything inside you sat down for a moment. Yes, exactly that. And this is what we rarely learn in the noise of daily life, that to become nothing is not to lose, but to rest. It is not a falling apart, but a folding in, like dusk wrapping itself gently around the day. There's no panic here, no drama, just a release from the grip of needing to know, to be, to become. You're not erased, you're unveiled. Beneath all the motion of identity lies this quiet, this gentle nothing, and in it, there is peace. So let yourself drift now, not into forgetting, but into remembering what it feels like to carry nothing at all. No story, no role, no mask, just the quiet hum of being. What comes next is not the death of thought, but the space where thought no longer has to prove itself, where knowing becomes a whisper, and even that begins to dissolve. The place beyond questions. There comes a moment, sometimes at night, when the hum of thought grows quiet, not from exhaustion, but from release. Like a child who no longer tugs at their parent's hand, but simply walks beside them. This is not forgetting. It's not confusion. It's a kind of presence so full it no longer needs to be filled. One might say, but if I stop questioning, don't I stop growing? But maybe growth doesn't always spiral upward like a staircase. Maybe sometimes it softens downward like rain, soaking into the roots of what you already are. A man at a train station once whispered to a stranger beside him, "Do you ever feel like your whole life was a question? Just waiting to forget what it was asking?" The stranger smiled, not with certainty but with recognition. Some truths don't shout. They don't even speak. They breathe. And in that breath, no explanation is needed. Not because everything is known, but because nothing needs defending. It's tempting to believe that the point of living is to get it right, to find the cleanest answers, the tightest logic, the best reasons. But sometimes, when the lamp is turned off and the world slows into hush, a deeper clarity emerges. That life was never meant to be a test. There is a place inside you where even why dissolves, not in despair, not in surrender, but like ice melting into water, still itself, just less separate. That moment when you walk into a room and forget what you came in for, and instead of panic, you look around and stay. Because maybe the room had something to show you that had nothing to do with the reason. A barista once handed someone their drink and said softly, "You looked like you needed this, even before you ordered it." And strangely, the person did. Not the coffee, but the sense of being seen without having to explain. This is what it feels like in the place beyond questions, where awareness is no longer reaching, but resting, not inert, not asleep, but vibrant in its stillness. Philosophers once spoke of the via negativa, the path that reveals truth, not by adding, but by taking away. What remains is not emptiness. It's clarity without insistence, a knowing that does not name itself. And you, here, now, are allowed to dwell in that, to sit in the warmth of not knowing, not as a flaw, but as a final form of wisdom. No need to prove, no need to explain. You've arrived not at the end of thinking, but at the home it returns to when it's tired. Let the questions fall like autumn leaves. They had their season. And as you lie back, perhaps you'll notice that the space they left behind isn't hollow. It's full, in the way the sky is full. We begin the final 5, not as riddles to unravel, but as lullabies for a mind that has already learned to trust the silence beneath the sound. The gentle dissolution. What if the moment you stop trying to hold yourself together is the moment something deeper finally holds you? There's a quiet misconception that echoes in our culture. To dissolve is to vanish. To let go is to give up. To surrender is to cease being. But perhaps we've misunderstood the direction of this flow. Because many of the oldest spiritual traditions, Taoist breathwork, Zen silence, the mysticism of the Desert Fathers, speak not of vanishing into nothing, but of unfolding into everything. When the self loosens its grip, when identity begins to slip like water through cupped hands, what arises is not absence, but presence. In the stillness that follows the shedding of labels, roles, and resistances, there is no panic, there is no collapse, there is only space, gentle, wide, timeless. The ego whispers, "This is death," but the body knows better. The breath continues, the awareness softens, and something spacious begins to stretch beneath it all. "Do you ever feel like you're falling apart?" she asked one night, lying on her side, looking at the ceiling like it might answer. He blinked slowly, exhaling. "All the time," he said. "But lately I've been wondering, what if it's not falling apart? What if it's falling open?" We often think of identity like a fortress, guarded, stable, made of stone. But stone wears down, fortresses crumble, and when they do, light enters through the cracks. To dissolve is not to break, it is to become permeable, to allow more in. Fear dissolves into breath, thoughts melt into stillness. You're not being erased, you're being returned, not destroyed, but disarmed. Think of the way a wave folds back into the ocean. The crest disappears, yes, but only because it was never separate. It never had to cling to its shape to matter. Neither do you. It's easy to believe that letting go means losing everything, but the more we try to cling, the more fragmented we become. Like trying to hold fog with our hands, each grasp separates, divides, distorts. The miracle is in the release, in the soft, open palms that finally feel the warmth of sunlight on skin. "Do you think we'll still be ourselves when all this ends?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "I think we'll be more ourselves than we've ever been." She nodded, eyes fluttering. "That sounds lighter." "It is," he said. "It always was. This isn't about disappearing, it's about allowing. The layers of performance peel away, and what remains is raw and wide as the sky. Not a name, not a story, just presence. A soft awareness behind the eyes that doesn't speak, but sees. Doesn't judge, but listens. You are not the walls. You are the space they once enclosed. So let go now of the narration, the effort, the inner tightening. Let it all slip beneath you, like sand under slow-moving water. You don't have to hold up the idea of you anymore. Even this voice, even these words, they were never the whole of what you are. There is something beneath it all that does not need to grasp or prove or even name. It just is. Let yourself fall into that. Not down, but inward. Not away, but deeper. Because what comes next is older than thought and quieter than fear, and it has been waiting for you to open. The Ancestral Silence. Somewhere beneath your thoughts, beneath your name, there's a rhythm that's not yours, but somehow knows you. Not in the way a memory does, not like something you can explain, just a quiet that feels like it was always waiting. You ever feel like there's a part of you that never started? The man asking didn't look up from his tea. The other stirred slowly and said, "Yeah, like something that's been sitting in the background, even before I knew how to say me. Before there were phrases, before we could narrate ourselves into being, something deeper was already here. It wasn't hiding. It was holding everything. Every voice, every thought, every culture's origin. It all arises from this ancient stillness. Not ancient in the sense of time, but in the sense of foundation. It's not what came first. It's what always was. And silence, true silence, is not empty. It's full in a way sound could never be. Like the pause before a lover's name is spoken, or the hush in a forest that makes your skin listen. It's not trying to teach you anything, but when you sit with it, you understand. There's a kind of wisdom that doesn't use language. It doesn't arrive with explanation. It doesn't seek approval. It's just there, the same way breath returns after a sigh, the same way you feel your grandmother's gaze in the corner of a photo, the kind of knowing that looks through you without needing a reason. And when you rest here, not think about it, not chase it, just rest. You don't vanish. You don't fall apart. You remember something you never learned, something older than belief. "I don't know why," one of them said, watching shadows stretch across the sidewalk, "but when I close my eyes, I feel like I'm not alone, even in silence." "Especially in silence," the other replied. "This isn't nostalgia. It isn't a past you're trying to return to. It's not spiritual theater or psychological trick. It's what holds up the stage. The silence before the self steps in. The gentle presence that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Even your thoughts, loud as they can be, rest on this quiet like birds resting on a branch. And when they fly off, the branch doesn't break. It waits. So what would it mean to float back? Not to rewind through time, but to loosen the need to name everything. To rest for just a while, not as someone being, but as something known. Let go of the timeline. Let go of the script. You were not written into this life. You emerged from something wordless. And when you touch that again, even for a second, something unclenches in your chest. You don't have to call it anything. It doesn't need a label. Just feel it. Now, float gently, before stories, before roles, before anyone said you or me. We're almost home. But first, the final question, the one that waits just beyond silence. And it doesn't ask with words. It asks with presence. The final paradox. What if the very effort to awaken is what keeps you asleep? There's something quietly tragic in how much we try, how much we reach for clarity, chase meaning, strive to be better, wiser, more awakened. And yet, in that very strain, however noble, it's easy to overlook the stillness that's already here. The effort becomes its own fog, veiling the simplicity beneath. It's as if the mind builds a ladder toward the sky, unaware that the ground beneath its feet is already the sky in disguise. Two people sit at a cafe, the kind of place that hums softly with the comfort of shared silence. Do you ever feel like you're always searching for something, but you can't name what it is? Every day, the other replies. But lately, I'm starting to wonder, maybe the search itself is the problem. It's a quiet rebellion, this idea. We're taught to strive toward happiness, truth, transcendence. But striving assumes something is missing, something wrong with now. So you chase meditation, philosophy, rituals, breathwork, each promising the key. But keys imply locks, and sometimes it's the act of looking for a door that blinds us to the fact we're already outside. This paradox sits at the heart of so many spiritual traditions. The seeker becomes the barrier, because as long as you are seeking something more, you cannot fully see what is. The search divides. It draws a thin line between the self and the moment, between here and there, between this and that. And in doing so, it denies the sacred fullness of the present. But what if you stop? Not out of apathy, but with reverence. What if awakening isn't a climb, but a soft surrender? No steps, no striving, just noticing. Noticing that awareness has always been here. That presence isn't something to be gained, but something to be remembered in the pauses between effort. The man at the cafe stirs his tea absent-mindedly. I used to think awakening would feel like lightning, like a breakthrough. And now, it feels more like exhaling. Perhaps enlightenment isn't some mountain summit, shrouded in clouds and mystery, waiting for the determined climber. Perhaps it's the moment the mountain disappears, when the idea of reaching falls away and only this breath remains. And that's the final paradox, that the peace you seek isn't ahead of you. It's not locked in sacred texts or long retreats or cosmic visions. It's in the steam rising from your tea, in the way your shoulders settle when no one is looking, in the pause between your thoughts. You are not behind. You're not missing anything, and you never were. So let go, not with force, but like letting a feather slip from your hand. No push, no pull, just rest. Let yourself soften into the space that never left, the now that never needed improvement, the self that never required fixing. And as you do, you might feel something melt, a tension, a question, a grasp, not into oblivion, but into stillness, into being. And now, gently, we drift into the softest illusion of all. The dream called me. The dream of the self. There's a voice in your head that tells your story. It says, "This is who I am." It lists your preferences, your plans, your pain. It remembers yesterday and worries about tomorrow. But if you sit quietly, just long enough, you may notice something strange. The voice doesn't stay. It rises, pauses, shifts. Sometimes it's confident, sometimes it's scared. But it never settles. It never proves that it is you. It just narrates. "Hey," a soft voice murmurs in a coffee shop. "Sorry to ask, but are you waiting for someone?" You glance up. You weren't. But for a moment, you wonder if you should have been. "No," you say, smiling. "Just me." And somehow, that answer feels smaller than usual. Just me, feels like a line in a play you don't quite remember auditioning for. The concept of a self is useful. It gives the day a shape, a reason to try, a reason to protect. In psychology, it helps us set boundaries, heal wounds, tell our stories. In society, it helps us vote, grieve, celebrate, belong. The self is not bad, but maybe it's not what it claims to be either. Not a solid structure, more like a tent made of stories, stitched together by memory, held up by attention, blown gently by the winds of emotion. Neuroscientists have searched the brain with dazzling machines and microscopes, hoping to find the you behind your thoughts. But what they find instead are processes, networks firing, patterns syncing, nothing fixed. And in meditation, the more one looks for the self, the more it slips through the fingers of awareness, as if the act of searching only reminds you that there is nothing to hold on to. A woman once leaned over on a bench beside a stranger. Her voice was quiet, almost conspiratorial. Do you ever feel like you're just watching your life from the side? The man chuckled. Only every Tuesday, and most Wednesdays. And they both laughed, not because it was silly, but because it was true. Maybe the self is not a lie. Maybe it's a dream, a beautiful one, rich with symbols, full of courage and contradiction. And like any dream, it's meaningful while you're in it. But it doesn't need to last forever to be real. It doesn't need to stay to be cherished. What if the greatest kindness isn't to cling to the dream of me, but to thank it and let it rest? To watch as the narrator steps away, not in despair, but in peace. Like stepping off stage when the play has landed, when the lights dim, when the applause fades into stillness, not gone, just no longer needed. And there's freedom in that. Freedom to love without the fear of losing an identity. Freedom to feel joy that doesn't have to be labeled as yours. Freedom to sleep deeply, soundly, without anyone left to count the hours. As the night quiets and your thoughts begin to dissolve into softness, know this: the dream of the self is tender. It shaped you, protected you, gave you names for everything. But now, the dream can rest. Let the narrator step back. Let the script fall silent, because the final segment is not another thought. It's not another idea. It's the hush after the curtain. It's sleep, and you are already on your way. Stardust and silence. There's a hush that settles at the end of all thought. Not silence from absence, but a silence that listens, one that feels like being held. As if the universe, after spinning wild with questions, leans back and exhales, softly through you. And in that breath, you are here. You are stardust, yes. But not just the poetic kind we say to comfort ourselves. You are literal stardust, born from the collapse of ancient stars, scattered across space and gathered again in the shape of awareness. Somewhere along the arc of time, particles drifted through darkness and collided in just the right rhythm to become a nervous system, a memory, a question. You. A voice speaks gently in a dimly lit room. Do you ever think it's strange, one asks, that we're made from things that once lit galaxies? I think it's stranger that we forget, the other says, smiling. We forget that being alive is already the miracle. Because after all the analysis, the spirals of philosophy, the layered riddles of identity, logic, free will, what's left? Not a solution, not a finish line, but breath. And that breath, in its soft repetition, says more than any concept. It says, you're here, you made it, no need to chase anymore. You were never a puzzle to complete, never a code to crack. You are not a broken thing in need of repair, nor a shadow seeking light. You are the light, the echo of things that burned long before this earth spun its first morning. You are awareness shaped briefly into a name, a body, a thought, just so the cosmos could experience itself from the inside. Even identity, the thing we defend so fiercely, melts away in this stillness. Who are you without your memories? Without your roles, your past, your fears? You don't disappear, you expand. What remains isn't a void, but sky, wide, silent, infinite. There's something sacred in not needing to be anything, in letting go of the self as a task. When there's nothing left to prove, you find what was never missing, peace. And peace doesn't shout, it doesn't arrive in triumph. It waits, quietly, inside you. So close your eyes now. Let everything that was said dissolve. Let every theory fade into a gentle hum in the background. The paradoxes, the doubts, the wondering, they'll wait for you. But not tonight. Tonight you are not falling asleep. You are falling inward, back into the origin, back into the space before thought, before form, before even the question, who am I? You are not disappearing. You are returning. You are falling home. Sleep well, beautiful mind. The mystery will still be here when you wake. You've wandered the corridors of paradox and passed through the mirrors of thought. Some doors led nowhere, some led to yourself, and some just opened into silence. Did you notice? The deeper the trap, the softer your grip became. Not every loop needs untangling. Not every question craves a conclusion. You don't need to know how to be free of the maze, just to stop running. So rest now, beautiful mind. There's nothing to solve, no self to fix, no truth to chase tonight. Just the soft hum of awareness and the quiet pulse of stars thinking themselves into sleep. When you wake, the mystery will still be here. But for now, let it drift. Let it dissolve. You are not lost. You're just home.